Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today is our episode 7 deep dive of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, where we're covering chapters 48 through 55. As always, let's start with our content warnings. While today's discussion focuses on chapters 48 through 55 of Silver Flames, all of these episodes include spoilers for the entire ACOSF series. These deep dives do not, however, have spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas' series, even though it feels next to impossible for today in particular. But don't worry, because at the end of every episode, especially today, is our Maasverse Madness segment, where we give a big spoiler warning for the other Maasverse books before continuing our conversation with Crescent City and /or Throne of Glass connections. Pretty much Crescent City. Just read Crescent City.
Just reading Crescent City. So with all that said, if you don't know how the harp likes to stir up trouble at the prison of all places, then please go finish the series. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
There's a lot of sex in this episode, to the point that I think this is the first time in FFG history that we are skipping over sex scenes. But don't worry, we're covering the important ones. So please do be mindful of those little listening ears. However, in all seriousness, in our lead up to the lake scene this episode, we will be discussing Nesta's rock bottom, which does include thoughts of suicide. I will give another trigger warning when we get close to that section, so you can skip if you'd like, but please listen to your comfort level.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events.
We are going to be dancing the night away at the Fantastique Collection's New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado.
We are going to be partnering with Barnes & Noble for the ONXY Storm Midnight Release Party on January 20th, 2025 in Glendale, Colorado.
We have so much in store as podcast partners at Romantasy BookCon in Los Angeles in February and in Orlando in October 2025.
And last but not least, we will be featured guests at Enchanticon in St. Louis, Missouri, August 15th through 17th, 2025.
Links to all of these events and more information are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOSF series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 membership tiers that you can join. Number 1, the Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, which is getting even more bopping in the lead up to not only our next series announcement, but also ONXY Storm. We also have live Q&As from Lexi and I, a book club, exclusive author interviews, community events, promo codes for live events, plus 20% off discounted merch. That is all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That's $10 a month. Or last but not least, you have the Inner Circle, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus more behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift, giveaways, private Discord channel, name shouted out on the podcast, and that is for $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now it is time for our Colorado hearts to sing as we go hike to a lake.
To kick off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in this stretch of chapters. So gather around, friends. We need an Inner Circle debrief for Silver Flames, chapters 48 through 55.
Chapter 48, cue Kristoff's Frozen 2 power ballad Lost in the Woods, because our hike begins. And while Cassian is leading the way in silence, backpacking Nesta is grappling with what just happened with her sister. And let's say it's not going so well. Chapter 49, we're still out in the woods, but this is no glamping. Nesta has officially reached her rock bottom, and for 2 days, these two say nothing until Nesta collapses from dehydration. But only 1 day more, and this dynamic duo reaches a lake for only Nesta to fall to her knees and cry. Chapter 50. It all comes to the surface as Nesta erupts. She cries about her father, about his death, about her cruelty, about how she cannot fix herself, and that's just a few of the things that she cries about. But Cassian, with the off-the-chart emotional intelligence, tells his mate, not a mate, exactly what she needs to hear, and hands her his sword to instruct her on the different positions. In more ways than one, my guy. Part 3, Valkyrie, Chapter 51. Back at the training ring, girl talk is back and in full swing. After some prodding from Emery, Nesta coyly admits that her and Cassian fucked like bunnies on the lakefront for days Squeeze straight. But get your mind out of the gutter, ladies, because it's time for the final Valkyrie test, the ribbon test. Emery, the oldest, kicks off their attempts, and it's a swing and a miss. But it's time to put your minds back in the gutter, because bang, bang, bangity bang. I said it. You have no idea what you just started. Bang! Montage! Filled with stairs climbing, Valkyrie training, and of course, fucking Cassian. And most of all, resenting every damn ribbon in sight. No one more than Gwen. One day, while chatting with her friend, Nesta opens up to Gwen about her past and what landed her in the House of Wind. And to Nesta's surprise, Gwen does not resent her for it. Instead, Gwen invites her to service that night. Chapter 52. Hosier said it best. Take me to church! Nesta, so enamored by the music of the priestess's service, gets lost in the sound. Like, really lost. Like, hundreds of miles away in a prison lost. But it looks like an 8-pointed star marks the spot. Nesta accidentally scries and finds the harp's location. Chapter 53. The next day, we are back at the prison. Nesta and Cassian make their way to the spooky passage that Nesta saw in her scrying. And hey, we didn't know this was here. And man, what a secret chamber this is. Covered completely in constellations that feel different somehow. What could that mean? And at the center of this 8-pointed star marking the middle of the room is the harp. Nesta, being made, is able to pass through the wards that circle the chamber. And when she touches the harp, she hears people trapped within the walls. We're just going to skip over that right now because, oopsie, it looks like there's a new mind-to-mind connection between Nesta and Briellen, who now knows where the harp is. Nesta gets out of the wards, harp in hand, and together her and Cassian walk out of the chamber. But, oh no! Who let the Lanthus out? Who? Chapter 54. Cassian, terrified at facing his old foe, demands that Nesta save herself and begins to battle this mist monster. Nesta starts running towards the prison's exit, but immediately regrets leaving Cassian behind. And what's that in the distance? I spy with my little eye some Autumn Court soldiers. No time to waste. The harp mentions being able to leap through time and space. So let's give it a go. The short string ought to do it. It worked! Nesta joins in the fight, and using her maid sword, Nesta kills Lanthus, but not before he shows her a vision of them on a throne ruling over all. And the 3 objects of the trove plus a mystery 4th object. What could that mean? With Cassian injured, we have to make a quick escape. So if the smallest string will go short distances, I don't know, strings ought to work out, right? It worked! Nesta and Cassian arrive on the grassy front of the river house in Valaris, chapter 55. While Cassian gets healed, Feyre and Nesta make up, but Rhys goes into an epic download, sharing everything he knows about the Daglan. And let's just say this is a really long 2-part Suriel today. But there's a new plan afoot. Lock up the harp and super duper ward it. But what about Eris? We need to show him that we're still on his side because we need allies bad. Well, winter solstice is coming up at the Court of Nightmares. Nesta, dance with him! There's one more thing Nesta needs to do to fully reach evolved Pokemon status with her healing journey, though. Nesta and Cassian visit her old cottage, where Nesta is able to finally make peace with her father's death, her cruelty, and her old shoes.
Oh my goodness. Before we dive into today's jam-packed episode, we are so excited to talk about one of our favorite sponsors, Book of the Month. You know us. We're always looking for our next book obsession. But in case you haven't noticed, there's a lot of books out there. But Book of the Month takes the overwhelm out of choosing your next read.
Book of the Month is more than just a subscription service. They've made it their mission to help readers discover new books that they will love and to promote the work of emerging authors. Huzzah! Every month, they present a selection of the best new titles. I recently picked out The Road of Bones by Demi Winters from their November picks, and I can't wait to read it, especially coming into December. Things are slowing down. Like, we're getting into the holidays. I can't wait to just cozy up with a read. And the best part is that Book of the Month offers these amazing books at fantastic prices, and shipping is always free. Plus, their loyalty program is just the cherry on top with even better deals the longer you stick around.
With the holidays just around the corner, this is the perfect time to treat yourself to a subscription or get a gift for your friends and family. Right now, you can head over to bookofthemonth.com and get your first book for only $9.99 using the code TURKEY. It's such a good deal. We cannot recommend Book of the Month enough. It's not just about receiving books, it's about the joy of discovery. Type in bookofthemonth.com and then use code TURKEY and get your first book for $9.99.
Make sure to let Book of the Month know we sent you by selecting Fantasy Fangirls under podcasts in the survey after picking out your book.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. Buckle up, everyone. We have a roller coaster of an episode today. Let's start where we left off. Nesta, overwhelmed with rage and hurt, told Farah that she and the baby are going to die. So Cassian swooped Nesta up and flew them for hours to the Sleeping Mountains, which is a range that separates Illyria from Valaris, and the Sleeping Mountains are smaller peaks in the Illyrian Mountains and not as cold, which means perfect for hiking, and more importantly, potentially healing for Nesta in a way she hasn't experienced yet. Cassian knows that going back to Valaris won't save her from herself and her self-loathing. He also knows that he can't save her from herself either. Only Nesta can save herself. He can help and support and offer guidance, but it is ultimately up to her to truly look inward and forgive herself. Cassian chose the Sleeping Mountains for the self-reflection retreat because more once told him that long ago, these lands were used for healing. People injured in body and spirit went to these hills in the lake, which is a few days hike away, to recover and heal. It's my understanding that we're not talking about Thesen's kind of healing magic, but there is a certain healing essence to this land that evokes strength and rest and hope wrapped up in its beauty and tranquility. And that's why Cassian is drawn to this specific location for Nesta's literal and metaphorical journey.
This sounds delicious. Like BRB booking a trip here now. Do they have an Airbnb? I will go.
Even though he's here to help her, it's undeniable that Cassian is still upset with Nesta. More than anyone else, he has seen firsthand how much she can grow and what she can achieve when she applies herself. He has seen the friendships and connections that she makes when she is comfortable in her own skin. He has seen the real Nesta that exists behind the hateful and vengeful exterior. But then she goes and does what she did to Farah, and he feels betrayed at her self-sabotage. There's this "how could you do something so terrible?" question. He knows the answer to it, hence why he's taking her on this hike. But just because he knows the reason, which we talked all about last episode, it still doesn't make it okay. While Cassian understands that healing is never linear, as we've also discussed so much on this podcast, this was more than just a few steps back. This was Nesta purposefully hurting Farah, who has been nothing but kind and supportive of her sister for a long time now. Cassian sticks up for Nesta against all odds, and he has been so proud of her. And then she goes and blows it all up. So yeah, he's allowed to be upset that she broke his trust and proved she is capable of lashing out in the most hurtful way. It goes back to that metaphor that she is a caged wolf. So here he is helping the wolf roam free.
Meanwhile, inside Nesta's head, there's no longer rage, anger, or hatred. There is truly nothing. Not in a numbing herself out way, much like she was constantly at the beginning of the book and searching for that oblivion. She has now lost any and all fight and has given up on herself entirely. Please note that I am about to talk about thoughts of suicide. If that is triggering for you, please skip ahead a few minutes. She has worked so hard these past few months to, major air quotes, fix herself. But in this moment, every step feels like those months have been just completely erased, and almost like a mocking, "Oh, you really thought you could get better," is going off in her head. This was a few steps forward and 1,000 steps back for Nesta, and it cuts deeper because of how hard she fought to get those few steps forward. Her regression isn't just painful, it almost feels like a betrayal of every ounce of work she put in. And now she's here convinced that she is indeed unfixable, hopeless, and a true failure. No multi-day hike will cure this. So why bother talking? Why bother eating? Why bother stopping to drink water? Or why even bother having a will to live? To the point that even when Cassian warns her not to fall because she'll fall and break every bone in her body, she looks up at him with an expression that almost says, "Good." Only a few chapters ago, Nesta said that she sees herself leading an army of female warriors someday. She saw a future, and now that future is nowhere even near in her line of vision. Even the will to try to survive feels out of her reach, and she has truly reached her rock bottom.
Cassian makes the executive decision to take her on this hike for multiple reasons that all tie into her facing her inner demons head on in a way she hasn't experienced yet. Number one, most of all, he recognizes that this physically challenging hike can be a catalyst for emotional release, which is something Nesta has already shown works well for her based on her growth from training. Nesta has been so consumed by her emotions, self-hatred, shame, guilt, anger, to the point that it's caved in on itself, as Nicole was just saying. But Cassian knows it'll boil over again, and when it does, he'll be here. This physical exertion can help her channel that energy into a productive, freeing way. It can even help her bring her emotions to a boil, not by taunting, but in a "it's time to face this head on" kind of way. way. When she's emotionally stripped, again, not in a bad meaning, but where she has the opportunity to think and feel outside of this too loud roaring in her head, she'll begin to be capable of coming to terms with her raw and true self. Number 2, hiking in the Sleeping Mountains means they're surrounded by natural beauty, serenity, and solitude. I, for one, think this kind of immersion in nature is so healing for our souls, no matter the circumstances. Being here allows Nesta the chance to find moments of peace, introspection, and a sense of grounding as she currently spirals and feels swallowed up by her self-loathing. It can help her see beyond herself in this wide open space that stretches on for miles and miles, as she thinks she is nothing and no one in comparison to all of that. This is also a very private space. It's just the two of them out here. No one else is around to judge at what comes next. Number 3, like always, Cassian is right here every step of the way, literally. But unlike usually, he's not pushing her to open up. Nope, he's here to weather the storm when she finally needs to unleash all this emotion and face the ugliness within. And he'll patiently hike with her in silence until then, because he recognizes it will take time.
One of my favorite moments of this entire chapter stretch is him saying, like, do you need to hike for 5 days straight? That's fine, as long as you'll talk to me at the end of it. Like, that is just such a true partner statement because of these two and their dynamic. Like, oh, I just love that so much.
I love it so much. I do want to address something real quickly because we understand some of the fandom doesn't agree with Cassian's approach with the hike here for similar reasons to the initial ultimatum that landed her in the House of Wind. You all know our stance on the emphasis and empowerment of choice in this series. And here it may come off as Cassian taking Nesta's sense of control and choice away from her, making her do this multi-day hike. Instead of hiking to heal, it's hiking to punish her. And forcing her to face her inner demons like intended isn't fair to do when she may not be ready yet. This is her healing journey and he's intervening where this might break her more instead of ultimately build her up. And I'll be honest, when I first came across this, I was very surprised by this viewpoint because I never got that vibe from Cassian. Yes, he's my number one book boyfriend, but you all know I'm not afraid to give him L's like I did last episode plenty of times. This is Cassian's version of tough love, and that's how I've always understood it. He's mad at Nesta, but he brought her here to heal in nature, to exert her energy and emotional tension. And yes, to be forced to look inward at who she is, who she wants to be, and what she has to mentally overcome. She has been progressing so much between getting excited about the future, creating friendships, training to revive the Valkyries, and being a role model for these other traumatized females. And yet, it's not the hardest work she has to do, like Amren bluntly but truthfully told her. She has to face what fuels the worst part of her, for her to ever gain control of that hateful spite eating away at her from the inside. I don't believe he brought her here to these mountains to fix herself. He'll even tell her at the lake that there's nothing to fix. But Nesta needs to forgive herself. What she did was wrong, yes, and he's upset with her. But this anger and shame needs to be expelled on a deeper level so she can keep growing. He knows healing journeys aren't linear, and he wants to help her get back on track. And in order to do that, he is, so to speak, throwing her into the deep end. Because, as we've discussed, Nesta is an extreme person, and she is not in a mental state right now to make productive choices. That's not me assuming on her behalf. It's right there on the page in her POV. So he's stepping in to say, okay, this is what we're going to do together to help you get back on track. He won't let her slip back to square one because he knows she's got it in her. But like he reflects, she has to be willing to save herself.
5 days after this hike began, these two climb up the final hill where the sparkling turquoise lake is there to greet them. And Nesta's legs officially give out. Her vision blurs. Quote, her eyes stung as if they'd been sliced, cleaved open to allow the tears to pass. God, I love that imagery right there. And she begins to cry, unlike anything we've seen from Nesta before. This is the moment, the true opening of the floodgates that this emotional journey has been working to for 50 chapters. Nesta, who has always shoved her feelings down, distracting herself, numbing out, she's slowly been making holes in her emotional dam. And this rock bottom is what finally took a sledgehammer to it all. Now, all those pent up and horrible thoughts are hitting her like a tidal wave. And it's exactly what Nesta has been avoiding for over a year now. She is someone who doesn't just feel, she feels everything to the point of almost pain. There are so many reasons for this pain, though. What she said to Feyre, how she treated her family during their time of poverty, for how she's given up on herself, for how her closest sister has chosen another to call her confidant, for how she's hurt the man standing right next to her, and so much more. But one thought filled her with such guilt and shame that it's eating her alive and it rises above the rest. Quote, I let him die. Let him is such a specific word choice here. It implies that she didn't do anything, that she stood idly by, that she didn't try. But he did. Her father did. He came to save her and her sisters, choosing her name on the ship that he rode into battle, and he fought for her and her safety. While she believes that she hated her father so much that she didn't even try to stop his death. And it's because of that she didn't deserve this overflowing love that he had for her in the final battle. She is so horrible, so wretched, and she doesn't ever, ever, ever deserve love again. This is what her inner monologue is saying. And she hates this part about herself, that she is the type of person who would allow such horrible and hateful things to become her. She wants to be better. We've seen that throughout this whole book so far. But to be better means to let her walls down. And to let those walls down means that it would be this level of feeling. That wall of anger, rage, and hurting others has been her coping mechanism to make sure she protects herself from feeling this overwhelming way. And it's been like this for so long that just to flip it on its head, it's almost like her brain panics and it won't allow it to happen. She's now looking back on these past few months and saying, this is what happens when you try. You pretend to be fine, cured even, and then that horrible part of you will make sure you hurt others. And it all boils down to one sentence. I can't fix me. There is so much relatability in these 4 words. So much of the reason that people feel really connected to Nesta in this journey is because they've had this feeling like they're too far gone to be fixed, cured, etc., because they believe themselves to be truly broken, and that hopelessness is overwhelming and all-consuming. And as Nesta says here, quote, I deserve nothing. Nesta is so powerful because to read about a female protagonist who is this raw and visceral, who feels things this deeply, again, to the point of pain, and who rather than overcome all her demons, instead grows to accept her imperfections, it is so special and incredibly freeing to know that you, the reader, are not alone in your own journey feeling this way too. And luckily, there is someone who is here to listen.
Sorry. Getting teary-eyed here. Cassian has been Nesta's constant, patient, empathetic, and even tough love support for her throughout this book. He's nurtured a safe space for the two of them, which is why it is so important that it's Cassian here with her as she breaks down. This is the most vulnerable Nesta has ever been in her entire life. She is finally voicing her worst thoughts about herself and starting to work through and face those inner demons. And he's not here to push, but he is guiding her through it so she can untangle the thoughts and emotions. Like he says, he's here every step of the way, which is a foreign concept for Nesta, who feels like her flaws should make her unlovable, and she's purposefully pushed people away so that they wouldn't be with her every step of the way because she doesn't feel like she deserves it. He doesn't tell her what she should feel or harp on anything or sugarcoat the challenges that she's facing. He simply offers his acceptance of her, all of her, and reminds her that she deserves to accept herself too. As she says she is unworthy, he says, both with his words and how he strokes her head, that yes, she is, and he sees her for who she truly is. A good person who cares, who fights for the people she loves, who is brave and loyal, who is sharp and bold and has that I will slay my enemies look, which is his favorite, by the way. And that person deserves forgiveness of herself. And only when she can forgive herself will she begin to be able to move forward. I'm sorry, this part is the most relatable thing I've ever read. And it's really hard and really meaningful to talk about it. And I can't believe I'm crying into the microphone like I am right now. Quote, there's nothing broken to be fixed, Cassian tells her, and he means it. He means it so much. And Nesta has felt like something is wrong with her for most of her life, and especially these last few years. She feels like she shouldn't be the way she is. Yet by getting swallowed up by all these shoulds, she only sees her worst traits. The idea that there's nothing broken to be fixed goes against everything she has internalized about herself, when really there is so much strength and goodness within her. And he reminds her that she will get through this, but only if she is willing to face it and embrace it and walk through it. She has to fight for herself like she fights for others. But what's more, she has to believe in herself that she is worth fighting for. And sure, it won't happen overnight, and there's a long road ahead. Cassian's very clear on that. Again, he's not sugarcoating this, but it is worth it, and Nesta is worth it.
I think about how many of us put others in front of ourselves. Looking at you, Lex, and how there is so much strength in that. And it might not be like Nesta. It might not be with that fierce determination that you put others in front of you. It might be with soft and kindness or something. I don't know. It's everyone looks different, but to hear that you're worth fighting for as much as other people, how many moments in our lives have we needed to hear these words?
I have really struggled with accepting myself and liking myself. And I have also felt like I am someone who is broken, who needs fixing. And a lot of shoulds about I should be more this way, I should be more that way. And it wasn't really until I became a mother that I learned how to embrace myself and my good traits too. And so when I read this, I think back on who I used to be and how I still have a difficult time thinking about who that person was because I'm embarrassed about her. And I've always tied that person with who I am now. And I've been rewriting that identity for myself, both when I became a mother and especially with Fantasy Fangirls. And it's just really meaningful. That's all I can say here. And Cassian's love and compassion for Nesta is both a catalyst and a mirror, helping her see that she is worthy of love despite her past. And he reminds her that looking ahead is more important. That's more important for all of us here. Yes, apologize to those that she wants to, but it's time to let the baggage that she's been carrying around, let it go. And that starts with her accepting herself, and there is nothing to fix. She is a complex whole person, just like all of us. And it's okay to give herself and all of ourselves permission to be that way. She doesn't need to change to be deserving of respect or love. It's time to recognize her own value. And this is vital to Nesta's healing journey. Instead of her working toward being fixed and erasing parts of her past, this begins a shift in perspective that her healing journey is embracing and understanding herself. I love this scene so much, and I'm at a loss for words about how to describe how moving this is and how seen I feel.
As her and Cassian sit by the water's edge, there's a small piece of herself that whispers the word try. And this tiny 3-letter word is so transformative for Nesta and many people in the similar rock bottom. It's not a promise of success or an assurance that you'll change and everything will be happy, rainbows and butterflies, but instead it's this fragile, essential step forward. It's a reminder that healing doesn't happen overnight. And actually, one of the things I love about this book so much is that there's not like the, I'm healed, I'm good. It's the, I'm embracing my imperfections and I'm trying. That's why this is so impactful. Try offers a glimmer of grace and the first thread of compassion, really, for Nesta. Something that truly many of us could offer ourselves more, myself included. And I don't want to speak for you, Lex, but maybe both of us. As Cassian reminds her, the past is the past for a reason. And by putting one foot forward, it does not erase the past, but it also doesn't mean that everything she does going forward must be defined by the past. It's also a blank slate for her to choose something different. And through that, she can find those smaller victories in the act of trying, whether it's in learning to forgive herself or to open her heart to others like she'll do with Gwen later, or giving a nod to forgiveness to her little sister, again, like she will do later. This pinnacle part in Nesta's journey teaches us that we don't have to conquer every battle at once. Sometimes the most heroic act is simply to try. And breathe through one more day, one more moment, and trust that small steps truly can change everything. One of my favorite graphics, it's this person climbing a really steep hill, and then you zoom out and it's this one steep part in a overall very minimally steep hill. That's a picture's worth 1,000 words, and clearly I don't think I'm doing it justice right now, but there's this moment of everything's so much bigger than just that one moment. And through these small moments of trying, it compounds to something so much greater.
And after being there on the shores of the lake for hours, Cassian holding Nesta and the two of them sitting in the silence after her storm broke, which that's another thing I love. After such a big emotional breakthrough and conversation, the best thing, at least from my experience, is to sit there in silence, to sit with yourself and your emptiness after letting it all out. It's not emptiness in a bad way, and all that weight that you've been feeling on your shoulders is gone. And you're just able to sit with yourself and breathe for the first time in a while, knowing that when you move again, you'll rise up better than before. And that's exactly what happens here, because Cassian presses a kiss to her head and instructs Nesta to get up. He offers her his Illyrian blade, the real steel one, not Cassian's penis, and tells her to show him the 8-pointed star. Remember how when Nesta first did the movements for the 8-pointed star, something shifted in her. A warrior was forged in that moment back at the training ring. And this is Nesta's rebirth right here, right now. It's time to rise from the ashes and try. Quote, each slice was perfection, like that 8-pointed star was stamped on her very heart. And the light in her eyes shines brighter than the moon above. Again, Cassian tells her, and Nesta begins. Oh my gosh, just chills. She already knows these movements, and tapping into this ritual in a moment of profound vulnerability, Nesta is showing that she can rise up and ground herself. She is in control of her body, of her mind, of her future. She is stepping into her new identity, the one that she chooses for herself, someone who is powerful and strong and also very compassionate and loyal, which we will get into way more soon with Ataraxia. It's important to note that Nesta won't be all better after this rebirth. That's not how anyone's healing journey works. She will continue to have her ups and downs, but this pivotal difference and growth from what she finally comes to terms with at this lake, it'll stay with her. For instance, she won't be able to face Rhys or Feyre for a little longer. It'll be awkward when she does have to be in Rhys's presence again, but with time and continued effort, they'll work toward healing their relationships.
It's also so beautiful that in a moment after this deep vulnerability from Nesta, Cassian wants her to feel powerful and back in her element. He knows that fighting has become a lifeline for Nesta far beyond just being good exercise and something to focus on. It's become an obsession and a calling for her. And he felt that shift in the room when she picked up the wooden sword, like you were mentioning. And now here he is saying, this is who you truly are. Fight for it. I also want to put a little bit of a theory hat on for a moment. If Nesta does truly resurrect the Dusk Court / now prison, a place that literally has an 8-pointed star on it, like we will be covering this episode, like we said, it's a roller coaster, it would be so symbolic that her taking up the 8-pointed star here in positions, that part of Nesta's journey, it's something that feels broken, lifeless, hopeless, herself, and the prison, and having it be brought back to life through these movements. Like, that's just such beautiful symbolism. I love it.
I love it so much too. And adding a little bit of evidence to this theory of yours, during the scene at the lake, quote, the lake gleamed like a silver mirror in the moonlight, so bright it could have been dusk. The descriptions are literally calling attention to it seeming like dusk as she goes through her own rebirth.
Speaking of rebirth, sometimes when I wake up after a really good night's sleep, I feel like I'm going through a rebirth of my own. And it's all thanks to Miracle Made and their incredible sheets.
These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get better sleep every single night.
Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. And they feel just as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. I swear, one of my favorite moments is getting into bed each day and cozying in with my Miracle Made sheets. I did that for like 3 hours while reading a Christmassy smut novel last night. It was great and I was so comfy.
Go to trymiracle.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo FF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FF and use code FF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/FF to treat yourself. Thank you so much, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
as we move into the penultimate part of this book, part 3, Valkyrie, we have to cover why the highest level of Valkyrie status is the second to last name rather than the final name of the part of this book. First off, this is the chapter stretch in which their training is not complete, but the final tests are passed. The ribbon is cut. The qualifier is complete. This is the chapter stretch where she literally gets her Valkyrie status. So the symbolism there is pretty one-to-one obvious. But this is also the chapter stretch that Nesta truly comes into her own completely. Her and Cassian DTR, maybe not with the word mates, but DTR as much as possible. She and her friends have their friendship cementing sleepover. She solidifies her found family. Plus the next part, Ataraxia, aka Inner Peace, I love that that's the final part of this book, which implies that it is above Valkyrie. But I am saving that analysis for episode 9.
Don't worry, I will definitely be getting into that this episode too, about Inner Peace and Ataraxia. Yep.
Days later, though, we are back in the training ring, but this time Gwen has something up her sleeve. A white ribbon tied to a wooden beam jutting out of the side of the training pit. Magically anchored to the stone? We're not really sure. But why is this new beam here? Because it is the test, the ultimate Valkyrie test. Only when you cut the ribbon with your sword will you become a true Valkyrie and you are officially ready for battle. But despite this sounding rather easy, it's not. If you, like me, were wondering why this is oh so challenging, let's go over why. So this ribbon is hanging all loosey-goosey off the beam. Its challenge comes from, because it so easily moves with any breeze, every time the sword swings toward it, the ribbon will basically move with it due to air resistance rather than against it, aka staying still, which is how it needs to be in order for it to be sliced. So the test is all about precision, swinging the sword with perfect control and technique, and timing, swinging the sword at exactly the right moment, just as the ribbon is as still as possible.
So, Nicole, are you saying it's technique?
It's technique! Technique!
First, you gotta go like this.
Turn around, stop!
3 times. 1, 2, 3.
Bring it around town.
Nesta and Gwen silently convey they don't want to be the first to try the ribbon, which means Emery is first to try cutting the ribbon. She's the oldest, after all. Remember that her wings were clipped during Amarantha's reign, and females are typically clipped when they get their first period as a teenager. So with this in mind, I've always assumed she's around 50 to 60 years old tops.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I love how having Emery go first is all done without any of them speaking. These 3 friends can read each other so well now that words aren't always necessary for a conversation.
I did see some people on TikTok speculating that this was a Easter egg that Gwen is actually a Daimati and able to speak into Emery's mind in this moment. But I agree with you completely. I think that this is much more a show don't tell for us readers, that they are just getting closer and closer. Like you and I can have conversations without speaking, and as much as I wish, we're not Daimati.
It's suspenseful. Will Emery cut the ribbon? And no. Quote, let's all admit we knew that would happen. I love it. How she can just make fun of herself in that way.
Relatable.
These females don't let their failed first attempts, or any that follow, dampen their spirits, though. In fact, it only makes them more determined to keep pushing themselves, to keep showing up and trying. There's that word, try again. They recognize this failure is not a reflection of their potential, and they have this big goal now to achieve the Valkyrie title, cutting the ribbon in half. I personally do love that it does take a while. It wasn't just an easy thing for them to do after training for several months. They have to work hard to make it happen, to keep showing up and trying and trying. It's not so much of a failure as it is a not yet. But that doesn't stop Nesta from soon enough getting triggered by the sight of a ribbon as if it's mocking and taunting her. That's such a Nesta thing.
Yes. After the failed ribbon cutting, with the exception of Cassian, who very well cut the ribbon on the first try, which preceded Nesta to turn feral, taking Cassian downstairs to his room. They only make it to the desk before he rips her pants down and they fuck. Which brings us to the question we ask every sex scene. Is this for plot, or is this sex for sex's sake and sex alone? And I 100% believe that this is just sex for sex's sake. And I'm not going to lie, this is one of my favorite sex scenes in the entire ACOSF series. It's playful. They're falling back into their own game of who can win. It's delicious. It's kind of vulgar. And I don't know. It's definitely not for the plot, but I'm not mad about it.
I'm pretty sure all of the scenes moving forward, except, of course, the one on Winter Solstice with it being their mating bond, Pretty sure we're just in sex for sex sake at this point.
Absolutely. Again, I'm not mad about it.
Who's ready for a montage? Over the course of a week, Nesta keeps at it with the stairs. She hasn't been able to reach the bottom again, even though she knows she is capable of it now. She also does know she can find a way to see Amren or Feyre, like asking Cassian to take her to the river house, but she's not ready to face them yet. She's back to working on herself and using the stairs as her own challenge, her own training tactic. She's doing the stair challenge to build up the leg strength to get to the bottom, versus she's fueled by all of her emotions that propel her down there. I know it's a fine line, but I think that's a difference that Nesta really does embrace.
Don't think we're going to gloss over that stair math. She makes it about halfway, and while we don't have an exact number of steps, I'm just going to go with an even halfway of 5,000 steps, which is 0.71 miles, 1.4 kilometers, or 3.17 Empire State Building trips one way. But we got to go both ways because she goes up and down. So 1.43 miles, 2.29 kilometers, or, good Lord, 6.34 Empire State Building trips if she's going both ways. 6.34 trips up and down the Empire State Building.
Also, during this montage, at the beginning and end of every training session, these three females tried to cut the ribbon, alas, with no success. And don't forget, Nesta and Cassian are fucking like buddy rabbits every night and sometimes afternoon delight. But alas, still no sleeping in each other's rooms and snuggling. He's holding up to their agreement that it's just sex, even though we all know it's more than that. Also, I love how she's all upset that he's not staying for snuggles, and he's all sad that she's not asking him to stay for snuggles. It's like, you all so close with that communication, so close.
Fun fact, apparently it's really good for couples to snuggle for 30 minutes after sex, in case you needed to know that information.
Sounds like some nodding stuff right there.
Oh my God. I hate you for putting that in my head. I could never hate you. I love you too much. But damn, that. Oh, God. Anyway, but there's one soon-to-be Valkyrie who has her eyes trained on that ribbon. Gwyneth, as Nesta notes, has become the most relentless about succeeding in cutting this ribbon, which is such a testament to how much the Valkyrie training has brought Gwen back from her own darkness. We know from Gwen earlier in this book that she is not someone who feels like she can fail. So much like the stairs have become Nesta's obsession, the ribbon has become Gwen's. But who else has slightly similar personality traits? Someone who doesn't like to fail, someone who's relentless, someone who has maybe a bit of a competitive streak? My boy, Azriel. I feel like this line with how it's noted that Azriel's watching her putting the finishing touches on the ribbon. It's like, hey, look how similar these twos are. Foreshadowing. Even later, Gwen wants Azriel to teach her dagger handling. So while Cassian and Nesta go to visit the cottage, Az is giving Gwen her own private dagger lesson. And note, this is going to be before the bonus chapter for Winter Solstice. So, ooh.
Nesta opens up to Gwen about the possibility of taking the priestess up on her long ago invitation to join them for their evening service. Gwen had told Nesta that during their evening services, the priestesses have music, and this bit of information has stuck with Nesta, who, of course, loves music. I believe it's so symbolic that she asks Gwen if she can come after her breakthrough at the lake. For one, Nesta used to not feel like she belonged here in the library with these priestesses, and she didn't deserve to be in the sanctuary with them. Joining them for their evening service seemed like an invasion of their space. But now she is embracing that maybe she does belong here, that she is worthy of being welcomed into their sanctuary. As Nesta vulnerably shares with Gwen, she loves music. And back when she drowned herself in drink and strangers, she used to select taverns for their music. It's true that Nesta hasn't had much of a chance to bring music back into her life since moving to the House of Wind. But this chance of joining the priestesses has been here all along. And only now is she raising her hand and saying, yes, I deserve to bring music back into my life. Nesta has had a tendency to deny herself moments of joy, as she felt undeserving of happiness or peace. Now, though, there's a subtle but profound shift in her mindset with this willingness to seek out positive experiences and reconnect with what brings her joy. She's been doing that with her sex life, and her friendships. And now this is something else that fills her up with wonder that she wants back in her life that's just for her. She might not miss the drinking, gambling, and random sex, but she does miss music. And I love how self-aware she is to differentiate that.
It's like those walls she talked about at the lake are being taken down with the people that she trusts, where she feels comfortable opening up about things that previously she thought Gwen and co would literally stop being her friend if they knew. This is a huge step forward to Nesta to open up with someone who's not Cassian about this. So hooray, Nesta. What's the opposite of an L? Gold star?
Gold star, yes.
Gold star, Nesta.
As Nesta's opening up to Gwen with a short version of what this past year has been like and what led her to coming to the House of Wind, she waits for Gwen to judge her. She's been so terrified of her friends finding out how horrible of a person she is and her unworthiness. And I can understand Nesta's fear. After all, everyone else judged her for her actions and behavior. But Gwen only answers with sorrow and support. Quote, "Your story is worth telling, you know." In other words, you are worthy. That Nesta doesn't have to be ashamed of who she was or let her past failures define her present or future. Her backstory, as messy as shameful as it is, led her to become the stronger and kinder person she is today. If anyone understands that on a deep level, it's Gwen, who admits she lives in fear of Nesta and Emery finding out her own history and her failures because they'll never look at her the same way. And in this moment, these two friends are so vulnerable with one another, and each of them reassures the other that they are there, that they're not going anywhere. It might not be time for Gwen to tell her story yet, but Nesta silently lets her know she will be here to support her friend when she is ready to share. Gwen's story is worth telling too. During the big confrontation with Amren accused Nesta of not knowing what the word friend meant, and Nesta spiraled, believing that Gwen and Emery would hate her once they knew who she really was. But Gwen is learning who Nesta really is, and she's reinforcing that she's not going anywhere. And Nesta doesn't realize until she hears Gwen say it how badly she needed that reassurance that she is welcome and supported.
Well, yeah, because Amren last episode was like, you don't know what friendship is. And here's Gwen saying, fuck that. Like, you are my friend through and through. I choose you as my found family. I'm still mad at Amren, clearly.
I absolutely agree. And Amren did get burned in that friendship. I will not negate that. She did with the old Nesta, and she is not ready to forgive Nesta to meet the new Nesta.
Fine, look at it.
I'm not saying she does not deserve that, Ella. She absolutely does. That was not cool of her to say. And we always look in that person's perspective, and I can understand where Amren was coming from.
You're right. You're right. Older sister logic, whatever.
Support for today's episode comes from iHerb. iHerb offers the best curated selection of over 50,000 wellness products at the best possible value across a variety of categories, such as supplements, sports nutrition, groceries, baby, and beauty. This is your one-stop shop for all your health and wellness needs.
You can also trust that your products will arrive in first-rate condition because iHerb orders are shipped from a climate-controlled fulfilled centers in the U.S. to ensure the quality of their products. Plus, they ship to over 180 countries. Yes!
Products available at iHerb are sourced directly from the brands or authorized distributors in the U.S. There are no third-party sellers. This is so important when there are companies out there selling fake products and you have no idea what ingredients are in them. And iHerb does not allow third-party resellers on its website or mobile apps. Then, to top it all off, you get free shipping in the USA on purchases over $30, and they offer 24/7 customer support if you have questions about your order.
We knew going into our partnership with iHerb that there was a variety of products, but when I went to go place my order, oh my God, I got everything from makeup setting spray, my favorite protein powder that Brett and I always use, nail polish, all my supplements are on there. Literally everything I could ever want is living on that website. You bet I placed a big old order with iHerb.
Well, and you can too, because our listeners get 22% off their first order when you use code FFG at iHerb.com/shop/FFG. Existing customers receive 15% off. That's 22% off your first order at iHerb.com/shop/FFG and then use promo code FFG. Choose iHerb because wellness matters.
Later at dusk, the service starts, and Nesta may be sitting in one of the far back pews, but hey, she still made it. She notices right away that the cave's own beauty is really what's on display here. There's no idols, no gilded furniture, just a stone pillar acting as a pulpit. I view this as saying you are enough, priestesses. No adornments, no extras, but rather you as yourself is worthy. Clotho and Meryl take the stage, followed by a group of a 7 female choir, one of which is Gwen. And there's that number 7. It's all over the page in this entire scene. And Gwen begins to sing, a faint glow radiating from her. This is the scene that solidified that Gwen is part light singer for me. For the full theory, listen to episode 5. But
I'm still going with that she is Lucian's daughter, and that is why she glows, because she has the decor in her.
I mean, that's a really good theory. I'm not going to lie. I could see both. I'm not going to lie. But Nesta is not thinking of light singers. Instead, her soul basically leaves her body, and not in a scrying way yet. The music makes Nesta come alive, and we really see for the first time how much music affects Nesta. And as cheesy as it sounds, it makes me so happy that she got to have music in those moments where she was spiraling, where she was drunk, where she was fucking strangers. She would still have music in those taverns. And I know just knowing how important it is to her soul, that just does make me happy. So she closes her eyes and lets the music take over, literally.
As Nesta feels wrapped up in the music, something quite interesting happens. She is lulled, quote, down into a pure ancient place where no outside world existed. No time, nothing but the music in her bones, the stones at her feet, her side, overhead. Bones and stones, you say? While feeling relaxed and vulnerable, she accidentally taps into the deeper parts of herself and her powers. She isn't purposefully seeking out the harp of the Dread Trove, but she is paying attention to the harp at this evening service, and it is literally on her mind right before she slips into this trance. And with her own bones and the stones of this beautiful cave, Nesta unintentionally scries.
In her trance, she sees a massive mist-covered mountain with the land completely barren, except for moss and the gray sea around it. Ah, hello, prison. Nesta continues through the carved gates and into the complete darkness filled with living, terrible creatures, sensing one that is a greater horror than the others, being of mist and hatred. Might as well just wave and say, see you soon, Lanthus. Drifting down and down until she comes face to face with a rock. But psych! It's only an illusion of a rock, and that she is able to step through easily and enter a long hallway that goes into the mountain's depths, until she sees symbols etched into every surface of the cavern that pulses with spells and wards. But in the center, laid there as if, quote, by someone who merely walked away and forgotten it, it is the golden harp. Quote, let me sing again. Join your voice with mine. Ah, hello. Like calls to like, which shockingly, we actually don't get to add to our count in this little scrying session. Nesta is completely and utterly at this harp's mercy, being called to it, which we will later learn her paying a visit is as kin to waking up the Cauldron-powered musical instrument, until Nesta falls to the floor, suddenly back in the cave with the priestesses, scrying over. But there is no time to waste, because we got to get these objects. After a day of Rhys unweaving the wards around the prison, wards that are similar to what Rhys put around Feyre, and what are only newly in place because Rhys and Feyre were worried about Baron trying to free the inmates at the prison with the up-and-coming conquest with Brialyn, much like how they freed the Bone Carver in the last war in Akabor. Personally, I think they're giving Baron a lot of credit here, but I also get them not wanting to underestimate their enemies.
Again. Just saying, we saw some things happen in the last few books.
I love how they're like, we'll underestimate the King of Hybern, but Baron, that guy, we can't underestimate him at all. After those 24 hours, Nesta and Cassian face the climb up to the prison gates. A certain female warrior with a new piece of steel. Rhys gave Nesta her greatsword that the blacksmith dropped on his doorstep and that she imbued with the essence of Cauldron. I am curious, aside from Cassian's don't use this prison trip as one of your experiments, which is so old Rhys, God, I miss that like playful mischievousness that he had. Why do you think he changed his mind and gave Nesta this biggest, baddest weapon after he was like voting against her?
I do think it comes down to him giving her a chance in the prison, and that is a safer space for her to test out her crazy powers. And I don't know if I say safer space, but I mean like if things go wrong, it's better than in Valaris with the innocent people. Well, I do think too that they're probably considering giving Eris the dagger, which they will be doing soon. So maybe it's them trying to figure out exactly how much power is in these.
Okay. I'll accept that. I'll accept that answer.
Yeah. Time ceases to matter as they go downward, passing the prison cells where the inmates whisper through the walls and the blue anise scrapes its nails behind its doors. Nesta begins to comprehend just how terrible this place is and can't imagine what it was like for Amren to be trapped down here for thousands of years. Not even because she deserved to be locked away down here, but instead because Amren was feared in her true form and mistaken to be associated with the Daglan. Not entirely unlike how Nesta is misunderstood to be a monster herself. And yet, Amren found Nesta to be terrible. And if anyone knows anything about monsters, it's Amren after being trapped down here with the worst of them. It reminds me of Nesta's conversation with Cassian earlier in the book, when she escalated it into a full-blown argument and accused him of thinking she's like a monster who should be locked away down here. Nesta is, in real time, having to detangle those thoughts of negative self-talk and the real truth. She does not deserve to be down here. She is not one of these monsters, even if Amren thinks so. In part by the simple fact that she acknowledges and regrets how badly she treated her friend and used her as a shield against everyone else. Eventually, Nesta spies the alcove next to the familiar iron door with a single rune on its surface. Yes, she recognizes this spot in a heartbeat. It's burned into her memory from the scrying trance. They need to go through the rock within this corner. Of course, the iron door that is literally right next to it is Lanthus's cell. I'm guessing the rune on his door is part of the spell warding him inside, and I wonder if the iron doors act as an additional magical repellent for him. We know iron doesn't actually work on the Fae, like the humans have long believed, but maybe it works on these death god creatures. Actually, I say that. I don't think so, because that would make Lanthus afraid of a lot more things than a made weapon. But anyway... Nesta steps up to the alcove and is able to walk through the rock. Cassian marvels at this chamber of secrets. They had no idea something like this existed in the prison. It really makes me wonder what other secrets there are to uncover, especially underground. Like, oh, I don't know, in Ramiel? Anyway, we're not going down that rabbit hole right now. Nesta and Cassian enter a hallway. No cells here, though. No one knew of the secret entrance to the chamber where the harp has been hiding for thousands and thousands of years.
Cassian is naturally very wary. He's not sure if they're going to end up in this super secret chamber of secrets or face to face with one of the terrible monsters. But his red siphon shines on a round chamber, and sitting in the center of it, a golden harp covered in intricate embossing and silver strings. He cannot sense any of the wards or spells that Nesta feels whirling around the chamber, which, pause. This brings up two questions. Number one, Cassian is an amazing fighter. Like, he is the leader of the Night Court armies for a reason. But why? Why, oh why, did they not bring someone who, I don't know, can actually feel/understand magical wards in a magically warded prison other than Nesta?
I was pretty positive this was because Nesta is made and that's why she feels these wards.
I think it's something else that I cannot talk about here. So, okay, building off of that, Nesta can feel these wards because of similar reasons that she was able to pass through the masks wards in the Hewn City, which like calls to like after all. Yes, that brings us to count number 14 for the entire series. But I also wonder if there is another instance on this land and the magic on it is calling to Nesta specifically, especially because she notes that her presence might go unnoticed by the wards, but Cassian's would set it off. That's all I can hint at. More on this in Maasverse Madness.
And with that, Nesta takes a step over the line separating the hall and the chamber. While the wards allow her through, she notes that they feel like mud and that they feel incredibly old. Once again, emphasizing just how ancient and secretive this chamber is and who may have put the harp here. Cassian wonders if the prison with all its evil monsters and terrible magic was strategically put here to specifically hide the harp. Whoever hid it here must have existed before the High Lords ruled, perhaps around the time of High King Fion's reign? And if the prison was indeed once an 8th court, the Dusk Court, then maybe this person is connected to that. I'm just going to say right now, before I go off in Maasverse Madness, I really think the Archerons are descendants of the Fae, and specifically whoever placed the harp here, which is one more reason why Nesta has, quote, the creeping feeling she'd been brought here, not by the cauldron or the mother or the harp, by something vaster, something that stretched into the stars carved all around them.
Well, and this might be the reason that she herself is able to step through these wards. In addition to being made, she might be a descendant of the person who, I don't know, created them.
Yep.
God, I can't wait for Maasverse Madness. There's something interesting about this room, though. Those carvings on the floor all seem to spiral towards one point. Constellations on the outside, and in the center, like a golden sun, lay the harp. I love this mix of language with stars and sun, because as Cassian notes, this is the night court, but something's different here than night court magic. Almost like stars and sun, the bridge of day and night, aka dusk. The harp sits on this large rendering of an 8-pointed star. The north, south, east, and west points are all stretching out
Never
longer.
eat sake waffles.
You're so cute. I love you so much. This is very interesting. This is the same style of tattoo, this 8-pointed star with these longer points at the north, south, east, west, or never eat soggy waffles if you're Lexi. It's the same tattoo that's on her back. This is fate written all over the page. It cements for me that Nesta is supposed to be the resurrector of this lost 8th court, aka the Dusk Court. So with destiny singing in her ears, she reaches out and her hand brushes against the icy metal of the harp.
Real quickly, before we get into this crazy sequence here, Nicole, when ACOSF 6 comes out, and let's say that Nesta does not end up resurrecting the Dusk Court, I think you and I might actually have to put some eggs on our faces because of how convinced we are about this.
There's multiple things that, like, I'm so willing to die on these hills, and whenever ACOSF 6 ever comes out, if she doesn't pull a George R.R. Martin and waits 10 years, which I'm not going to even speak that into existence more, yeah, we'll need to put some eggs on our faces.
We get something like a flashback when Nesta touches the harp, which hums against her skin as if it still holds its final note from the last time it was used. Nesta begins feeling like she's tumbling through air and stars and time. And in this flashback, Fae are screaming and pounding on stone walls that hadn't been there a moment ago, clawing at what used to be a door. They're frantically begging to be let out, pleading to at least pass the children through so they can be spared. When I first read this, it was such a what the fuck moment. With our knowledge that the prison used to actually be an 8th court, does that mean these people trying to get through the stone belonged to this court? What were they running from? What was chasing them? Did it have something to do with the monsters that are now imprisoned here? Nesta thinks the last person who used the harp was very wicked, and they used it to trap their enemies and their enemies' children into the stone itself. Later in chapter 55 with the Inner Circle, Nesta will wonder if the person who last used the harp trapped the people who once lived on the prison's islands in the walls somehow. So do all these Fae still exist within the stone, or have they cursed it, contributing to the dark magic of the prison? But if the harp can open portals to different locations and realities, what does that mean for this unique chamber and its constellations? Like you mentioned, Nicole, Cassian points out that they're in the night court, so there's carvings of the stars. But Nesta feels it's different from the night court magic. So what if these constellations and Nesta feeling like she's falling through stars and time are tied to the harp's magic and these portals it's capable of opening? Or, since the harp can transport people, as we'll soon see with Nesta plucking its strings, did its last user wield it to get away from where these other people were trying to escape from? And everyone else tried to come with the person, but, quote, the way back was now forever sealed. If that's the case, though, does that mean the last person who used the harp was the bad guy, and these enemies Nesta refers to were actually the good guys? And that's all I can say about that.
You tease. And almost like the harp said, that's enough. You have an entire universe to read. Because then there's a blinding flash of light, and suddenly we're in a great hall with 6 thrones, 5 of which are empty, and the one in the middle contains an old crone with a spiked golden crown on her head. Briellen, what are you doing here, my gal? Her eyes sharpen right to Nesta because she realizes that Nesta has the harp. First, How on earth did Briellen get this level of magic to work for her where she put a booby trap, for lack of a better term, on the harp? Is this Koschei's doing?
I always thought it was the power of the made objects and their connection with the made people and the cauldron.
Who's her tutor, though? Like, this is a lot of very
I definitely think that
magic.
Koschei is her tutor and he's helping her, but I don't really feel like there's any tutoring to go along with this.
Oh, interesting.
It's that Briellen is wearing the crown and Nesta touches the harp, which automatically creates like this bridge between them who are both using made objects and they are both made people.
Well, yes, to build off that, because their minds are now like this open connection pathways, which I'm a little confused on how this works, but I'm going to chalk it all up to just like magic and made magic.
Yes,
but
made magic is always the answer. Yes. The cauldron boiled them both.
That's factually accurate. But Briellen said something rather interesting. Quote, "My spies told me who your friends are." What? Spies? What spies?
We talked about this. Remember how some of the Illyrians went over to the continent and she lured Bellius away and she got him? So I don't know what the plural here is, but we know at least Bellius.
But she's only hung out with Emery and Gwen at the House of Wind.
If I remember correctly, at the very end, when they have this connection, she taps into all of Nesta. She gets a full download with Nesta. And so this here is when she realizes the depth of her friendships, specifically with Gwen as well. But she already knew about her connection with Emery because of Bellius.
Okay, I was like, what sneaky priestesses are up to some shady shit with Briellen? But
don't you dare say anything bad about the priestesses.
Well, it makes a lot more sense now that it's Bellius, because of course it is, my guy. With a creepy quote, "I know where you are, Nesta Archeron," Nesta is flung back onto the chamber floor, clutching the harp in her hands with a screaming Cassian beyond the wards.
But we're not done with harp magic. Nesta can't let go of the harp, and it feels like an invisible, oppressive weight is bearing into her. So Nesta tells it to free her, and the harp answers, quote, "Shall I open a door for you then? Release that which is caught?" In other words, shall I open Lanthus's door? I assume the harp is toying with Nesta. They are sentient in their own way, and I can see the harp liking to play games, as everybody will find out. Nesta thinks to herself a few pages later when facing off Lanthus that the harp said it wanted to play, and indeed it is playing with their lives. Is it just trying to cause chaos, or is it angry at how it was used last time? Does it want to test Nesta? I like the idea of the harp testing Nesta. The harp is both warning Nesta what it's capable of and inviting her to find out. And not knowing just quite what she's about to do, Nesta plucks the first string and the weight that was crushing her lifts.
One of the things that will never cease to make my heart all tingly in this scene is how worried Cassian is for Nesta. Again, just another huge neon sign that yes, these two are mates. But even after Nesta comes back from the wards, his body remains taut and he surveys every inch of her. Quote, "It was as intimate as any look he'd ever given her." It goes on to keep saying that even when his cock is buried deep inside her, he's moving in her. I'm like, SJM, I get the point. Thank you. That's saying something. This is so much more than just sex with them. It's a blossoming of true friendship and care for the other person, to the point that as Cassian and Nesta are walking out of the tunnel, thinking that they're going to, just dump the harp off with Rhys and that's his problem, and they're going to go up into the House of Wind and do some naughty things, Nesta reaches up and kisses him lightly. I love that it's kisses him lightly. It's gently there, telling him that she thinks he might just be her friend. Back in our ACOSF,
and he's like, "Really? You think so?"
He's like, "I've been buried deep in you, moving in you." Back in our ACOSF coverage, the foundation of friendship was such a huge theme for Rhys and Feyre, allowing them to both go on their own healing journeys, finding that comfort, vulnerability, and safety within each other. And then it turned into something more intimate. And boy, did it. But even though Cassian and Nesta have definitely been intimate they are, this admission of friendship goes so much bigger than just sex. It's, I trust you. I like spending time with you. I enjoy you as a person, not just your body. Which Cassian is so stunned by this vulnerable admission, telling her that he's always been her friend, always. And she may get cut off by Cassian demanding for her to run, but Nesta was, I think, about to say, "And I've always been your friend." This is a huge win for our girl Nesta. Just last episode, again, Amren was yelling at her that she didn't know the meaning of friendship. And here she is saying that Cassian has always been a friend to her, even when it was hard for her to feel that way. Yes, she pushed him away. No, he did not like that. No, we are not letting her off the hook of that. But they found their way back to that friendship.
Nesta reveals that she named her maid sword Ataraxia. It's a word from the old language, which she found in a book in the library the other day. I believe this is the same old language that the Kelpie had spoken to her, the one that hadn't been spoken in the Fae homeworld for 10,000 years, and that Rhys and Amren know. We won't learn until Nesta's final face-off with Belius in chapter 70 what the name Ataraxia means, though. But too bad, I'm going to spoil it right now anyway. It translates to inner peace. Recall that only a few weeks ago, Nesta considered the name Killer for a greatsword. But she's looked inward, started to accept herself, and grown so much since then, leading her to name her sword Inner Peace instead. Nesta has desperately been seeking her own sense of inner peace all book. And as part of her journey toward finding that inner peace, she has found tranquility, purpose, grounding, and training to become a Valkyrie. Think about how impactful the 8-pointed star movement was for her, both the first time she practiced it and during her rise up from the ashes at the lake. Being a warrior and wielding her sword helps her tap into her inner strength, her inner peace, and Ataraxia symbolizes that for her. I also love how this made weapon is something to be feared. It is extra powerful and dangerous in this world. But for Nesta, it doesn't represent conquering or death. Instead, it is part of her accepting this great responsibility with her power and harnessing it for good, both for herself and against evil. This great sword, just like Nesta, can be a deadly weapon and a symbol of serenity. It, like Nesta, also embodies the values of the Valkyrie. And with Ataraxia, Nesta can lead these female warriors into a new age.
I also want to throw out that because I went to Google Translate and looked up Ataraxia, while the word itself is Greek and it translates to turbulence, at first I accidentally misspelled with a Z instead of an X for Ataraxia. And with the Z, it was Basque for portal. So I'm just going to leave that there. Could be nothing. Could be my dyslexia coming up.
While Nesta has been busy getting to know herself, for some of us, it's important to make getting to know our partners more of a priority. Well, Paired is here to help you do just that. It's an app for couples who want to strengthen their relationships. It was founded on the simple belief that real, lasting love is a daily practice. All of Paired's content is backed by experts and relationship therapists, and it's proven to work.
And here's how it works. You and your partner download the app, pair together, and every day Paired gives you personalized questions, quizzes, and games to stay connected, deepen your conversations, and have fun too. When you sign up for Paired Premium, only one partner needs to pay for the subscription, 2 for the price of 1. Yay! The best part is that you can't see your partner's answers until you answer yourself. So it's a safe space to have open and honest discussions about your relationship. No faking it, no pretending, just genuine connection.
Jake and I recently started using Paired, and oh my goodness, we really love it. It started to become a daily ritual for us just to take a moment to truly be together, which is very difficult when you got a lot of distractions like children and all that. It can help you learn how to communicate better, open up more, argue less, and discuss difficult topics like our financial situation or how to be the best parents we can for our little ones.
Whether you're just a few dates in or have been together for a long time, find the time to connect with your partner and nourish your relationship. With the Paired app, it's easy and fun, and it only takes 5 minutes a day. We have an exclusive deal for our listeners. Get 50% off a subscription by going to paired.com/FFG50. Again, that's 50% off when you sign up for a subscription by using our link at paired.com/FFG50 to sign up today. But dun dun dun, Cassian screams at Nesta to run, save yourself, because looking ahead, he sees that the door to Lanthus' cell has been open. Turns out that when Nesta asked that harp to open up these wards and let her go, it did. Also to the wards nearby, like Lanthus' cell. And it says it's wanting to play. Maybe it's not the game that they were wanting. Remember, Lanthus is the monster that Cassian fears above all else. And I'm guessing that this includes Bryaxis. Whenever we've gone into the prison before, there's always been a looming worst case scenario. This is the worst case scenario. To have a terrifying monster freed, but also one that is supposedly unkillable and required quite the Ash Mirror maneuvering to get him trapped, this is Cassian's worst fear come to light.
And remember, it was a task to capture Lanthus in the first place, and a trick that won't fool him twice. So yeah, they're fucked right now.
Not to mention, the fact that they also don't know if the harp opening up these wards was also extended to other cells, so they might have a whole prison worth of monsters to deal with right now. I have a question though. Where the hell are the guards who live within the rock of the mountain? From ACOSF, quote, "The guards only emerge at feeding time or to deal with restless prisoners." Y'all, you have one job!
Oh, man. Well, when this happens with Lanthus's door opening, Cassian knows two things. Not three things like Rune Dannon, but two. The first and most obvious is that he's about to die. The second is that he will do anything to keep Nesta alive. Without any hesitancy, Cassian faces and accepts death. As he has said multiple times, he is a soldier, and part of being a soldier is walking beside death, marching into it. Cassian's courage and strength in the face of death reminds me actually of a quote from George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. Bran asked his father if a man can still be brave if he's afraid, and Eddard Stark responds, "That's the only time a man can be brave." Cassian is a Gryffindor through and through, and in times like these, he may be afraid, but his courage and dedication to save others triumphs, even at the guaranteed cost of his own life. While I wholeheartedly believe he would do the exact same thing for anyone else he'd be down here in the prison with, this sacrifice is especially front and center because of course he will throw himself in harm's way to save Nesta, his not yet official mate. I can't wait until we can say official mate.
Man, me too. It's going to be a short episode or a short time when we're actually able to say that.
Taking the form of Mist, Lanthus is ready to play. He wondered when he and Cassian, Lord of Bastards, would meet again. He's been biding his time down here before he found a way to escape. After all, he's a true immortal. 2 centuries down in this prison is nothing. I love how in the face of death, Cassian doesn't balk, because of course he doesn't, and he dishes it right back to Lanthus. Seems like somebody helped Lanthus's door open. He didn't do anything for this escape, and Cassian calls him a rain cloud. I love you so much, Cassian. Once again, I have to point out how Nesta embraces being a witch. She is new. She is different. She took power that did not want her to have it. When Lanthus asks what she is, she doesn't hesitate in her reply that she's a witch. Do I think she actually believes herself to be a witch? No, but I do think that she is so self-conscious about what she is that having this scary label that sort of fits gives her courage in the face of her enemies. It makes her a threat versus her being like, I don't know what I am.
As Lanthus taunts Nesta and Cassian stink, something Nesta clutches behind her is brought to his attention. Quote, "Ah, I see it now. Long have I wondered who would come to claim it. I could hear its music, you know, its final note, like an echo in the stone." Apparently my Lanthus is not quite as creepy. While Lanthus was trapped in the prison long after the harp was placed in the chamber, I'm assuming because he was the one furthest down in the cells closest to the harp, the music was able to linger just to him. Or maybe even further.
Possibly. I think maybe he's also just being that true immortal.
Yeah.
And even knowing about its existence in the first place, there's maybe some of that magic at play. I don't really know. Yeah. And then he almost pulls an ACOSF Suriel on us, about to spill the beans that based on scent alone, he would guess Cassian and Nesta are, and Cassian immediately lunges at him, quote, before Lanthus could say one more damning word. Yes, that damning word is that they're mates. And even though Cassian knows they are, Nesta has no idea. And Cassian's not about to let Lanthus, of all people, be the one to share this very important, crucial information, potentially scaring her off.
Where have we seen that before? Then he flares his siphons and screams at Nesta to run, Nesta, run!
Nesta obeys Cassian and runs from the voice that was hate and cruelty and hunger. She sprints towards the gates, past the cell doors with monsters within screaming to get out too. Well, at least the words stay intact with them, and it seems only Lanthus's door open, so win there. However, when it clicks that Cassian might be dead by the time she reaches the gates, Nesta realizes she just ran from him and left him there to die. Remember back in ACOWAR during the final battle when the King of Hybern was about to kill her and Cassian? He tried to get her to leave him so she could save herself, and she refused. I can't, she told him, and it was as if she physically couldn't leave her mate. In the moment here that she runs, I think she innately knew to trust Cassian and follow his command. They've developed that kind of trust in their relationship. They're friends. She knows her own limitations and knows better than to believe she can go up against Lanthus. She probably recognizes that she would be in the way with Cassian's fight against him. But when it dawns on her that the result of her running is leaving Cassian to his death, she can't and won't do it. Because he's her friend, because she's brave and loyal, because she can't bear the idea of running away while he dies. And so she considers the harp in her hands and something dawns on her.
There's 26 strings on this harp, and Gwen's voice fills her mind, recounting Meryl's research of the possibility of 26 dimensions. Welcome back to Religion Watch, everybody. In Hebrew,
It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. It was really prominent in ACOSF. In Hebrew, the numerical value of God's name is 26, and the number symbolizes God's faithfulness and unchanging nature. I think 26 dimension is going to play a huge role moving forward in our story. To be honest, I couldn't even begin theorizing because I have no idea. But oh shit! Remember those wards on the island that Reese spent, 24 hours unweaving so that Nesta and Cassian can enter? It looks like 10 under the crown influenced Autumn Court soldiers took advantage of the lack of wards. Well, technically, Brialyn and Koschei did. But when Brialyn and Nesta opened up their brain pathways, she was able to turn on the location notifications and allow her, or really Koschei's power, to winnow these soldiers in so that they could steal the harp from Nesta. But sucks to suck, Autumn Court soldiers. Nesta plucks the first string of the harp. First, because it's the shortest, so it should be good for short distances, right? Correct. That worked out well. Thank God.
She returns to the scene of Cassian fighting Lanthus, the rain cloud, and he is most certainly losing because Lanthus's mist scatters at every thrust of Cass's sword. He cannot be killed, only contained. When Cassian sees with horror that Nesta returned, Lanthus takes the opportunity to wrap his mist around Cassian's throat and hurls him against a rock wall. Now Cassian is unmoving, out of commission. Nesta races to his side, relieved that he is alive, even if not for long. They've been in this exact position before. Him unable to move, head in her lap, approaching death, taunting them. But last time, Nesta waited for death. She didn't know how to fight. Now, though, Nesta is a warrior and determined not to fail. Never again. She stands up and draws her sword ataraxia and slashes a perfect combination. While it's not clear in this action sequence, Nesta will say later on that when she slices Lanthus here, it seems to bind him into a physical form. Because yes, Lanthus the rain cloud morphs into a naked, golden-haired, and beautiful male, and he is surprisingly terrified of this sword. He's shaking at the sight of it, screaming with pure shock and fury. Well, isn't this a turn of events? And Nesta's blade begins to glow. Hey, that's not Narbin. Narbin is the other magical sword that Amarantha was rumored to retrieve, but when it didn't bend to her will, she threw it into the sea. Lanthus is clearly familiar with Narbin, which makes me wonder how. Was it from the age of the Daglan, or in the thousands of years afterward? It's the only sword left in this world that he is afraid of because it's the only sword that can kill him, until now.
With this not Narbin weapon in hand, Lanthus asks Nesta, which death god are you? This question gave me pause. Why is he assuming that Nesta is a death god?
Because the power of death.
Well, yes, I know that. But did death gods wield these weapons, these super powerful weapons like Narbin? Death gods are those who have the power to eat life itself, which, yes, is Nesta's power of death. Thank you, Lexi. It does check out. But it does make me wonder who else has wielded Narbin? Because I'm not counting Amarantha.
Oh, that is a good point. Nesta even taunts Lanthus with a "you know whose fire" when he asks whose fire burns silver in her gaze. Who is she beneath this flesh? Because surely she can't be just as Fae. She must be something more. And right here is when we find out the bone carver wasn't the only one who heard about Nesta down here in the prison. Quote, "You are the one the sea and the wind and the earth whispered of. Nesta. You took from the cauldron itself." So because the cauldron is tied to the magic of the land itself, is that why the elements are whispering about Nesta? Or is it this territory in particular excited about its future queen gaining her powers, as if it knows she will be the one to resurrect the magic of this land? I know that it's pretty common for the wind and all that to whisper throughout this land, but Just wanted to throw that out there. Now realizing exactly who he's dealing with, the Cauldron Maid, Queen of Queens, Lanthus takes a different approach when facing Nesta and Ataraxia. Let's join our powers and return what was once lost. In other words, the age of when the Daglan ruled. Now, I don't think Lanthus himself is the Daglan. I know that there's been some back and forth on this, but I believe instead he was one of the Daglan's lackeys, one of their fiercest and cruelest warriors who ruled over the Fae and led the wild hunt. So it goes like Daglan, and then immortals like Lanthus, and then the Fae, and then the humans.
Yeah, that's exactly how I took it.
To convince Nesta of what they can be ruling together, Lanthus shows her quite the vision. Nesta sees herself on a black throne with a matching crown, Ataraxia leaning against her throne. Lanthus sits on her other side, hand laced through hers. Enormous onyx scaled beasts like the ones in the hewn city's pillars lay at the foot of the dais. Their kingdom is endless, their palace built of pure magic that lives and thrives around them. The harp and mask sit behind them on an altar, as well as a fourth object, but it's veiled in shadow. Seems like there's a gleam of age-worn bone. Ah, the rumored fourth object of the Dread Trove. However, then there's the crown sitting atop Lanthus's head. Wait. Whoa, dude. He just showed his hand that he would claim the crown for himself. And while it wouldn't work on Nesta because she is maid, everyone else would be bent to the rule, enslaved. This realization causes Nesta to pull out of the vision's trance of sorts. But then a new vision immediately follows. They're banging. And Lanthus gives Nesta such pleasure like she's never known before. Wait. Nesta snaps out of this illusion too, because our girl has known the best pleasure of all pleasures with my boy Cassian. And it's a hell of a lot better than anything Lanthus can offer her.
I think I just got a taste of what it's like when I cover a sex scene for you. I'm not going to lie. That was a feeling. In this vision, we get two mentions of Nesta being queen. One where Lanthus says, "And you shall be my queen," and Queen of Queens. This last one specifically screams high queen to me, which brings our queen count to 18. But joke's on you, Lanthus, because your temptation was not strong enough.
Because Nesta's bond with Cassian is too strong. Not even a true immortal can woo her away from her mate, not a mate yet. Speaking of, distracted by Nesta, Lanthus in his male form doesn't see Cassian throw his dagger into Lanthus's chest. Now, this is not the same dagger that Nesta made and that they'll give Eris. Rhys did give Nesta the great sword as an experiment here, but there's no mention of the made dagger. But Lanthus is currently trapped in a male form due to the slice from Ataraxia earlier, so the dagger has flesh to land in, which gives Nesta the opportunity to finish the job.
I know I gave Rhys shit earlier for giving her the sword and what changed his mind? Honestly, I'm glad it did, because they'd be dead.
For plot purposes, that's why.
Slicing in a 2-3 combo, Lanthus's head and corpse fall to the ground in two different directions. Oh, what imagery.
I love how the description is Nesta tapping into her training, using the power of breathing, her legs and her core, all that she's been working on, carry the blade through.
Ahem. This cannot be understated. This is a huge deal. Lanthus is a death god. He is immortal. He is supposed to be unkillable. That sounds a whole lot like Kosjay, doesn't it? And the bone carver who died from the cauldron, much like Lanthus dies from a cauldron-made weapon. I'm going to completely skirt over the Weaver because that just doesn't make any sense, cauldron boil me. But this tells our crew one very specific thing. The sword is just as much of a game changer as they assumed it would be. And if I was one of the Inner Circle, my immediate thought would be, great, we have 3 of these weapons and we can probably make more. Shouldn't we go kill Kosjay, who's like our biggest, baddest issue right now? But no. We have several other books that we need to get through, and we have a need for a big bad villain.
While this isn't Nesta's first kill, this is her first kill of the unkillable. The other prisoners are shaken as they can feel that Lanthus fell, and they're scared they'll be next. Quote, a small part of her delighted in it, even as the rest of her trembled. Nesta is discovering just how powerful she is with what she took from the cauldron. She's not cowering away from it, but she recognizes its danger. It's like she's beginning to treat it with the respect that Amren warned her about on the barge. With the unkillable, most terrifying monster in the prison dead, Cassian barely able to stand, and these Autumn Court soldiers, don't forget about them, on their way down the prison's pathway to take the harp. Don't worry, it was a long pathway, remember? Nesta plucks 3 strings of the harp, supposing that'll do the trick to send them back to Valaris. And phew, It worked. The harp takes them immediately to the grassy lawn of the river house.
I gotta imagine, after a long day of slaying a death god, the last thing that Nesta wants to do is think about what to make for dinner. But luckily, Factor's no prep, no mess meals have got our girl covered. From breakfast to dinner and anything in between, Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled and feeling your best. Whether you like routine or you enjoy mixing things up, Factor has got you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience options you can add to your box, like keto cookies, pressed juices, and smoothies. Don't let shorter days slow you down. Stay energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service.
Factor lets you do you. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Because Factor's meals are chef prepared and dietitian approved, you're going to love not only how Factor's meals taste, but also how they support your goals. And check this out. Factor is cheaper than takeout and dining out. Put the money you save toward holiday shopping or reaching your financial goals.
Plus, there's no sacrificing quality for convenience with Factor. Weekly menus offer ways to treat yourself to a restaurant-like meal experience with gourmet plus dishes that feature premium protein and seasonal sides like broccolini, leeks, and asparagus. How does truffle butter filet mignon or garlic roasted barramundi sound? Mouth watering. Stay on your A game with quality ingredients you can trust and quality you can taste in every one of Factor's fresh, never frozen meals.
Head to factormeals.com/fantasyfangirl50 and use code fantasyfangirl50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code fantasyfangirl50 at factormeals.com/fantasyfangirl50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
Whew! With that Lanthus crisis averted, it is time to head back to the river house and get their cuts mended up and have a sisterly makeup session. While Cassian is getting all fussed over, Fae-vorite and Nesta share a look. This is the first time they've acknowledged each other since Nesta told her about the baby and the consequences. Nesta silently apologizes to her sister, conveying all that she wants to say in a silent look on her face. And with that sister connection, Fae-vorite instantly knows what Nesta feels, so she speaks back into her mind, "Don't worry about it." Fae-vorite was never mad at Nesta. She saw what she did as finally speaking up against everyone else's silence. But I think this forgiveness goes so much more than just Nesta lashing out about this baby news.
Yes.
This is forgiving that part of Nesta who does these things and speaks in anger. And these 3 words, "I forgive you," mean everything for the healing Nesta. Side note though, why does everyone keep forgetting that Fae-vorite is a Daemati? Both Cassian and Nesta forget this ability in this book. What the heck? My girl.
It makes me want to go back and reread ACOTAR to see how often she uses it in ACOWAR and in ACOMAF.
Not a lot in the Inner Circle in ACOWAR.
Yes.
But when she was in the Spring Court, Homegirl was relishing in that ability.
Well, she didn't use it with Tamlin, remember?
I can't we cannot open up that can of worms. I'm already not enough at Tamlin.
Attention turns to the harp, with Fae-vorite stating how dangerous it would be in the hands of their enemies because it allows the user to winnow no matter the wards. I believe Rhys unwove the wards around the prison to allow entry to it, but there were still, of course, wards within the prison, so no one would have been able to, winnow inside of it. But obviously, Nesta was able to using the harp because it works outside the confines of ordinary magic. And our crew can't put that thing back where it came from, or so help me! Because Nesta has awoken the harp from its thousands of years long slumber, and the harp wants to stir up double trouble. So, where should the Inner Circle lock the harp to keep it safely away from enemies in trouble?
Rhys is put it with the other extremely dangerous objects that when united give someone immense power over others. And Fae-vorite, apparently doing all the Ravenclaw thinking, "It's okay, Rhys, you're distracted these days," advises to maybe keep them separate. For instance, she knows what it feels like when the 2 halves of the Book of Breathings were put me together. So of course this is top of her mind. That way, if someone does get through these wards, they don't get a 2-for-1 deal.
We get another big info download in this scene, a history lesson about the Wild Hunt and the Daglan. It's also today's Suriel Teatime, and let me just say, I'm pretty sure it shaved off several years of my life as well well as Brooke, our content researcher. Thank goodness we hired her because I would have died. So right here, I'm going to keep it pretty condensed and focus more so on why this history lesson is potentially important for our story and the future. One of the big plot and lore themes of Silver Flames is the past, the mystery around the territory that the prison used to be, the first and only High King Prythian ever had, the Daglan, who were the godlike overlords of the Fae before the High King, ancient made objects and their impact on the course of history and those in power. Rhys thought the Wild Hunt was a myth, but if Lanthus remembers it, that dates Lanthus to more than 15,000 years old. Rhys brings out a book of legends and flips it open to a page that reveals a group of tall, strange-looking beings with crowns atop their heads. According to oldest legend, the Daglan were near godlike monsters who created the Fae. For millennia, they enslaved the Fae and humans, and they drank the magic of the land like wine. But then one of the Fae heroes who rose up against the Daglan, Fionn, overthrew them with his cauldron-dipped greatsword, Gwydion. After defeating the Daglan overlords, 1,000 years of peace passed, and the lands were roughly divided into territories that would later become the courts. But by the end of those 1,000 years, the territories were on the brink of war with each other. So Fionn united them and became their ruler as High King. However, his queen and general overthrew him and took some of his bloodline's most powerful and precious weapons, like Gwydion and the Dread Trove perhaps, and out of the chaos that followed, the 7 High Lords and their courts settled into place, which is how the territories and rulership has been ever since. But when discussing the Wild Hunt, Nesta points out that the hounds look like the beasts in the hewn city, which I want to pause on this really quickly, because these beasts carved out of the rock of the Court of Nightmares also look like Rhys's beast form, minus the wings, as we saw during the final battle in ACOWAR. His beast form is a thing of nightmares, nothing human or fae in it. It's a creature that lives in black pits and only emerges at night to hunt and feasts, which also sounds quite a lot like the beasts in the Court of Nightmare pits, with their scales and claws and merciless hunger. Feyre believes that Rhys's beast form was carved into the Court of Nightmares, including the throne, because it's not only a representation of his power, but of what lurked within. It makes you wonder if over these 15,000 years, the Daglan's beasts from the Wild Hunt became beasts of the Night Court, and maybe the beasts of the pit are an evolved version of these hound beasts from the Wild Hunt. I don't really think there's anything crazy to that or any crazy connections, just an interesting tie-in.
Let us take a stroll down mythology lane and go over some folklore around the Wild Hunt, because in Northern, Western, and Eastern European, it is all over the folklore. In simplest terms, you hear that, folklore specialist? This is simplest terms. The Wild Hunt are a group of mythological figures chasing/hunting something. Anything, depending on what their heart desires in the moment. The leader of the hunt is often associated with Odin. Yes, there is Odin again. Odin, Norse mythology, who the Valkyries bring the dead to. How interesting.
And that was kind of who we were speculating might be their version of the king in this world.
Yes, this is the old wise king with one eye.
Yes, with one eye, yes.
And we're like, maybe he's inspired by the King of Valhalla in this world. We don't know. But Odin is only one of the options of the leader of the Wild Hunt. And honestly, it is a long list that ranges anywhere from Danish kings to the devil Satan himself. So insert bad guy, he's probably been associated with the leader of the Wild Hunt. Seeing the Wild Hunt is often an omen that war or mass death is underway. Yikes! So on this note of the Wild Hunt, do we think that it's going to come back into play in the ACOTAR world? Or is this just here for Lanthus to say, hey, I'm really, really, really bad?
I do believe it was a little bit of him strutting his stuff that he was very important, because being at the head of the Wild Hunt was a very, very big deal. But to answer your question, I believe a version of history is going to repeat itself, and Silver Flames is really setting us up for it. Yes, I think Lanthus brought it up to add historical depth to the world building, but that's such an interesting point about the hunt being an omen that war is approaching, because we also know that there is conflict among the Prythian courts, at least with autumn and kind of spring, and most definitely the continent. And what happened once before? A high king rose up and united the Prythian territories. But it's also like a word of caution, because that king's queen and general ended up betraying him. So I believe this history lesson is priming us for a potential unification of Prythian under a high ruler, not necessarily a king, but a high ruler, so they can be stronger as a whole, especially against the continent. If this does happen, I strongly think the courts will still govern themselves, at least for the most part. They will each still rule their own territory, territories, potentially even have the title of that high lordship, and then there will just be that higher up ruler who unifies everybody when it's necessary.
Oh, that's good. I love that so much. With the newly obtained heart, a new plan is afoot. With the 2 items of the trove that are already in their possession, although separately warded, there's still this issue of Brialyn and the looming war, like Lexi's saying. Rhys exhales a heavy sigh and realizes that it's time, yet again, to secure wartime alliances. And he has to do it like really quickly, even though that's already happened, but he has to do it really quickly again and secure ones that might have already been in place, but maybe a little strained. Ah, yes, their alliance with Eris is indeed strained after Tamlin caught him, Nesta, and Cassian meeting in the Spring Court. Eris is shaken and wonders if, because there's a chance of Tamlin outing them and their alliance, the Night Court will dip out of their agreement, leaving Eris to act in a not so great way. So the answer is simple. Our crew must remind Eris of their continued commitment to his cause. How do they do that? Not communication. It must be a grand gesture. Nesta, who has the dancing skills strong enough to bring a duke to his knee and propose marriage. What was that?
I was dancing.
Dancing. Like the little emoji girl in the red dress. Like,
that's exactly it. Yes.
Flamenco. I love it. Nesta must dance with Eris in the upcoming court of Nightmare's winter solstice and seduce him back into the Night Court's not so welcoming arms. Not necessarily seduce him into bed, but it's more like reminding him that the Night Court is worth being an ally to him because look what they have to offer. And if he upholds his end of the bargain, he might end up with a really good, very, very, very good dancer at his side. Nesta is not opposed to this plan, not because she doesn't have any wish to be near Eris, but because A, she loves playing the game, and B, because this means she will get to dance, something that makes her come alive. So Moore will start instructing Nesta on the Night Court specific dances and ensure that she is ready and will hold her own on the dance floor. I will say, Rhys is doing something very similar to what Nesta's mother did, and that was using Nesta's artistic spirit for politics. Not a great look, but Nesta allows it.
It was a question they asked of her, and she's like, hell yeah, I'll do it. I mean, not quite like that, but she was all for it. She loves to dance. She loves to play in the game like this.
Yes.
Yes, her mother absolutely did groom her for it, made her into a weapon, and Nesta, this is Nesta almost like being like, yes, I want to do this.
Exactly.
I want to take control of this situation. I want to help. To absolutely no one's surprise, Cassian immediately is like, fuck no. Excuse me. His exact words were, over my dead fucking body, before Nesta has the chance to answer. Cassian is always walking the line of Nesta's strongest protector to keep her safe and her loudest defender of what she's capable of. At one end of the spectrum, it's literally in his DNA as her mate to be this primal protector. And Eris, to quote Farah, is not good. Add in his own feelings about Eris and that this plan is Cassian's mate seducing his arch enemy, who's technically an ally. So yeah, this rash refusal makes sense, even if I want to smack him upside the head and tell my darling it's her choice. And on the other, he's teaching her to be able to hold her own, and he has to trust what she's learned. Just like she pointed out to him back in the harp chamber at the prison. I can appreciate how Nesta cuts him off and agrees, quote, if only to spite him for being so territorial. Nesta is someone that, in certain circumstances, you tell her she can't do something and she'll instead ensure she does it. This kind of political play is also Nesta's area of expertise, what she was groomed for by her mother all those years ago, as we were saying. And most of all, what she savors. Nesta loves dance and playing that political game. This is her jam, which is exactly why Rhys makes an offer to her in the first place.
There is one more big move that Nesta needs to make in order to feel like she is indeed on her way to healing. Visiting her family's old cottage where she, her sisters, and her father lived in poverty.
Yes, it's time for her to close the chapter on this part of her life. Like Cassian said at the lake, apologize to those you need to and move on. And that includes herself. In this instance, it's like she needs to forgive her past self in order to be that better version of herself she wants to be going forward.
Nesta needs to go to this place filled with such painful memories to ensure her mind of one thing. We got out. You are not this person anymore. Your sisters are safe. You are safe. This is finally looking a dark, deeply traumatic time in her life right in the face and saying, you do not hold power over me any longer, which, oh my God, that's so powerful. However, upon arriving and looking around, memories start flooding her mind, and despite trying to mind still her way into a calm, she seizes up.
Once again, Cassian is right here with her every step of the way. When he senses that she's self-conscious of the condition they used to live in, he assures her he's lived in far worse, reminding Nesta that she's not alone and he understands her, which she really needed to hear to be assured that she isn't alone in a past like this. He's following her lead at this cottage, while also offering her some prompts to help her work through what she needs to here.
With Cassian's support, Nesta is able to begin opening up more and more. Now it's not just the painful memories pelting her. Instead, she's able to look at these painful memories with exactly what they are: memories. They are not her current reality. But she's also able to look at these experiences, mainly her father and his actions, through a different lens. Nesta needed to come here with the knowledge that she now has about how her father felt, that he deeply loved her until the very end. As she stares around the living room and sees his old cot, it dawns on her that him sleeping on the cot was not so that he could look weak and pitiful every night, but instead it was that he wanted his daughters to have the bed, one of the few items of furniture they were able to keep from their old wealth. He wanted his daughters to be warm and comfortable, at least as they could be. Nesta at the time was too angry with him and their situation to ever be able to look through his point of view, and she would have spent her entire life thinking these horrible, hateful thoughts about her father and family. But seeing it in real life makes the reality of his love real to her, seeing just how he showed them love during this time when before she was too angry to believe he loved her or show her anything but signs of weakness. Yay, Nesta. So proud of you.
What an episode.
What
Still not done.
Wild episode this has been.
Let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in the rest of this book and speculation for what's next in the series. Nicole, I'm going to be honest. I feel like we've already discussed so much, and this episode was so dense that we maybe were not as focused on additional foreshadowing and speculation.
Whenever it's a prison episode, it's always so heavy on the lore that the favorite moments in the foreshadowing just takes a nice little second seat.
A little bit, yes.
And this is definitely the case. I've only a few. When Rhys was giving his major Daglan / Wild Hunt download, he mentions how Fionn was, quote, the first and only High King this land has ever had. We have speculated on how Rhys will indeed not end up being High King, and instead, a certain Nesta will end up being a High Queen. So if our speculations are true, this line from Rhys would be accurate. Fionn would be the only ever High King this land would have. Lanthus says to Cassian and Nesta that, quote, even death bows to that string, meaning the 26th string. And yes, it does. This is the exact string that Nesta will pluck and save Rhys, Feyre, and Nyx's life in the process.
The Autumn Court soldiers get away. They vanish by the time Rhys puts the wards back around the prison. And yes, they will come back into play for the finale of this book.
All right. It is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Lexi, are you ready for this?
No, but
every episode, Lexi will sit down with the Suriel RIP and sip some tea with it, walking us through a world building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it. Buckle up, buttercups. This is a big one.
So today's Suriel topic is the Daglan reign. We'll start with part 1 in this section, and then part 2 will continue in Maasverse Madness. All right, so who were the Daglan? The Daglan were near gods who were ancient, all-powerful, immortal beings who fed on the power of others. Daglan ruled for millennia, enslaving the fairies and humans of this ACOTAR world. They were known to be petty and cruel, and they delighted in terrorizing those under their control. According to Prythian's oldest legends, the Fae were created by these beings. But this isn't actually true, or at least the Daglan did not create the High Fae, but they did create other species. How did they rule over the land? Let's talk about it. Because they fed on the power of others, it's said that the Daglan drank the magic of the land like wine. There are conflicting stories about the Daglan, the Cauldron, and the Book of Breathings, so I'm going to do my best to navigate this accurately. The Daglan did not actually create the Cauldron. It already existed and was of the Fae world and their heritage. But when the Daglan arrived to the this world, they captured the Cauldron. Then, using their amplified powers thanks to the magic of this land, they corrupted the Cauldron so they could control it and make it their most valued weapon. But since they imbued power sourced directly from the land into the Cauldron, they bound the very essence of the Cauldron to the soul of this world. When they did this, they essentially created what we would consider a kill switch, which is why the world was about to collapse on itself when the Cauldron broke at the end of ACOWAR. Legend says that the Book of Breathings was written in the tongue of mighty beings who feared the Cauldron's power and made the book to negate the power or control it wholly. The description fits that these mighty beings were indeed the Daglan. But according to the bone carver, R.I.P., a dark maker used the last of the Cauldron's molten ore to forge the Book of Breathings. So we're left wondering if the Book of Breathings was created right after the Cauldron with this leftover molten ore, in which the Daglan would not have written the book, or the Daglan gained possession of the Cauldron and then they wrote the Book of Breathings. I'm leaning toward the latter based on other information I can't share in this part 1. They also created the Wild Hunt as a way to keep the fairies in line. For the Wild Hunt, the Daglan would gather a host of their fiercest, most merciless warriors like Lanthus and grant them free reign to kill as they pleased. They possessed mighty, monstrous beasts, hounds that they used to run prey to the ground before they tortured and killed them. In fact, as we learned from Nesta's vision, these hounds looked like the huge black scaled beasts carved into the hewn city's pillars and gates like we were talking about earlier. If we're talking about the Daglan, of course we have to talk about the Daglan's downfall. Around 15,000 years ago, Fion led an uprising against the Daglan. Fion defeated these nearly all-powerful oppressors with the help of his great sword Gwydion, because his made weapon was dipped in the Cauldron itself, and therefore it could kill the unkillable. That's all we know here about the Daglan's downfall, but here is one more interesting note. During the Great War between the Fae and the Daglan who oppressed them, there was a young Illyrian warrior named Anelius, who was dear friends with Fion and the original owner of Truthteller. Anelius held the line defending Ramiel from the Daglan's soldiers for days, which is why this area is now called the Pass of Anelius in his honor. Defending Ramiel against the Daglan, you say? And that is part 1 of the Daglan reign. Stay tuned for a whole lot more in part 2.
It is time to close out this ACOTAR only part of this episode with our Fae-vorite moments. I love how the ribbon taunts Nesta to the point that she resents any and all sights of ribbons. Like, she notes how Rosalind's hair ribbon is just like mocking her. That is delicious and so relatable. I love it. This is so small, but I love Nesta's harp logic. The small string, I can go from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain. So 3 strings should be about prison to Valaris. And I just I don't know why. It gives me girl math vibes. And I'm so
I was going to say, that's my kind of stair math right there. Oh man, how Cassian and Nesta look at the dresser in the cottage. And he notes how Farah really did paint the night sky before she knew about Rhys. Calling back to Rhys sending her that image, not knowing anything else about her all those years ago. And then last one here. Cassian saying that if they fly over the humans, it'll add a little spice to their days. All I gotta say is you two should talk to Rhys and Farah.
Oh! Wow. All right, friends, we are about to begin our Maasverse Madness section. But before we do, a huge welcome to our newest members of the Inner Circle. Y'all joined the Discord Inner Circle chat at a good time. It's been bopping lately with guesses for our next series. Mwahaha. Welcome to Jocelyn R, Nina C, M, Amanda O, Mackenzie L, Morgan J, and Camellia. Welcome to the Inner Circle.
Welcome. We appreciate you so much and are giving you the biggest hug. All right, friends. Today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for all of the Maasverse books. So if you have not read the entire SJM universe, this is when we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode we will be covering Silver Flames chapters 56 through 59. Ooh, it's going to seem so easy compared to today.
We could be covering anything and it would be easy compared to today.
And if you're like, hey, I want my name read off on the podcast too, be sure to join the Patreon party. The link is in the show notes.
Also, we are 1 week away from announcing our next series that we are covering after Onyx Storm. The Easter eggs are an Easter eggin'. Yes, we had quite a number of Easter eggs this episode. Mwahaha.
And if you want more Easter eggs, if you want all of the announcements, if you want way more content, if you just want everything Fantasy Fangirls, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
And last but not least, please do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It takes 2 seconds to hit that 5-star, to write a little love note in the review section. And to anyone who has done it, thank you so much. We cannot believe how many of you are out there listening to the show. It is so kind. Thank you.
All right, friends, we are officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories, or in today's case, part 2 of the Suriel. Today, we are discussing concepts and lore that give spoilers from the entire Maasverse. So please only continue listening if you've read all of the SJM books. Okay, everybody, they're gone, right? Can you tell how blue in the face we were not being able to talk about all of the Crescent City tie-ins to this part of the book? Like, at this point for today's Maasverse, just read Crescent City 3. There's your Maasverse Madness.
Celine download.
Yeah, just read the Celine download. Oh, speaking of which, let's kick off this ridiculously long Maasverse Madness with our Suriel Teatime part 2 on the Daglan. And I'm just trying not to do like an entire Crescent City Suriel Teatime. I don't know what their equivalent would be. Maybe like Jessica's Library or something.
Ooh, that's good. Library of Parthos, if you will.
Yes, the Library of Parthos. But no, we're not doing that. We're
not doing
with an ACOTAR. All right, so who are the Daglan really? They are the Asteri.
No!
Who conquer worlds and feed off the magic and lives of the citizens. Basically, they're parasites. They're tens of thousands of years old at the minimum, taking immortal to a whole new level of truly immortal. They're also able to survive long periods of time without breathing, eating, or drinking, as we saw with Thea's punishment for Vesperus, trapped beneath the prison for more than 15,000 years. Though the description of Daglan in their true form remains unknown, it is widely speculated that their true forms are an extreme form of raw power forged from stars that inhabit whatever bodies they possess. Bryce describes the Asteri as being made of light. The Asteri claim that their great powers are from holy stars inside themselves, and they can physically manipulate things with its light. By the way, Asteri means star in Greek. The Asteri can kill and destroy with their power. I feel like with being all-powerful beings, that goes without saying. But we learn that their current power originates from both the first light and second light of Midgard's inhabitants. Thus, the Asteri feed off the population and use that power instead of their own. A quick history about the Asteri. The Asteri claim to have forgotten the location of their original home world, but we know from Vesperus that was once green and plentiful, except it grew to be too populous, wars broke out, and rivers ran dry.
I also want to point out that the bone carver says, quote, "Where we came from, ... I do not believe it is now anything more than dust drifting across a plain. There is no home to return to, none that I desire." That sounds a whole lot like what Vesperus said. I am still team death gods equal Asteri light. I'm going to say they all come from the same world. We also know that almost every death god we've encountered has black blood. Weaver, Lanthus, I guess the Suriel too was a death god. So what does this mean? When we're looking at Volg, because Volg is immediately what we associate with black blood, I look at the death gods like Lanthus, Bone Carver as almost like Volg princes / princesses, and the Asteri are the evolved Volg kings and queens, because Volg and Vesperus both had black blood.
Yes. So anyway, on their home planet, this world's brightest minds found ways to bend the fabrics of worlds and travel between them. They called themselves wayfinders or world walkers. So they left their destroying planet to find life elsewhere in the universe. However, once they left their home world, the Asteri's powers started to dim. They were dependent on their land's inherent magic, and magic on other worlds wasn't potent enough. But they realized this too late, and they couldn't find a way back home. So they had to figure out ways to amplify their powers with the magic of the land. For instance, in the Fae homeworld, that's where they pooled their power together and imbued the gifts of the land into the cauldron so it would work to their will. They warped it, turning it into something deadlier, no longer just a tool of creation, but of destruction. They have records of their conquests going back millennia. Due to their need to survive and thrive off others, the Asteri have spent eons traveling from world to world, conquering and farming off the life forces of other races they deemed sustainable, and destroying any that rebelled. They give many worlds kill switches to protect their interests. However, during their conquests, only 3 worlds have been documented as successfully driving the Asteri out, including the Fae homeworld and Hell. Okay, so let's go back to the Asteri's reign in the Fae homeworld. They ruled over the Fae for 5,000 years, and the Fae ruled over the humans in the lands the Daglan allowed them to govern. Any attempt at rebellion was quashed before forces could be rallied. The Daglan were just too powerful. The Fae were forced to make the tithe to the Daglan once a year to offer up kernels of the Fae's power in tribute to their true masters. This was to fuel their own power, remember they feed off others' powers, and to limit the Fae's power. I'm assuming even though the Fae were forced to participate, technically they had to offer up this kernel of power. The Asteri hid pockets of their power throughout the lands in case their enslaved Fae should cause problems. Some of these pockets of power are likely beneath sacred mountains at their very roots. The magic draws all sorts of creatures. Not the fuzzy nice kind, but like the Midgard worm kind. Or perhaps even the crazy beasts over by Ramiel as well. Wouldn't that be interesting? There are certain places that are better suited to hold power than others, like where the veil between worlds is thin and magic naturally abounds. Mist around an environment are proof of somewhere being a thin place, like the prison territory, and every world has at least one thin place. The Asteri thrived here with magic naturally abound and the cauldron in their possession. Now, earlier I was talking about how they might have made the Book of Breathings, and I do believe that they did, because the language that it is written in is the same language of what is on Bryce's back, and that is what Amren says has not been spoken in 15,000 years, and it is what Rhys did not know about too. So that would have to be the Asteri's language, like what Ataraxia is from, is of the Fae's old language. With the cauldron in their possession, the Asteri made the trove, though kept the 4 items hidden under Ramiel and squabbled over who would use them. So basically no one ended up using them. Which brings us to their downfall. Over the millennia, the Daglan became arrogant in their unending dominion of this world, but their overconfidence blinded them to the force like none other that was gathering in secret. Thea ended up stealing the Dread Trove to use it to their advantage. Yet Thea and Fionn and the other Fae rebels knew they needed to use the most valuable weapon of all, the Cauldron, which was located at the base of Ramiel. Next thing we know, Fionn is pulling Gwydion out of the Cauldron, and they used these weapons against the Daglan to defeat them, destroy them, or send them off to another realm. But the surviving Asteri want to take back the Fae homeworld, which they believe to be rightfully theirs. So remember how I mentioned Anelius fought against the Daglan soldiers at the base of Ramiel? I think he held the line because they needed to guard the Cauldron. So somehow they got access to the Cauldron at the base of Ramiel, and he was the one who was guarding it. And that is why the pass is named in his honor.
Oh, that's good.
I felt really proud of myself for making that connection.
That is really good.
Let's round this out with how the Daglan/Asteri rule differently on Midgard. And I'm going to use present tense here, even though we all know what happens at the end of Crescent City, because you've read it, right? Because it seemed like the Asteri learned their lesson with Midgard. Blatant oppression, like on the Fae homeworld, led to revolution. In Midgard, they masked their oppression through the illusion of freedom and a twisted form of democracy. More than 15,000 years ago, after they were defeated by Fionn, the Asteri arrived on Midgard and began to lure other races from different worlds as a means to feed off of them. This included the Fae, shifters, and other Vanir. For instance, the shifter Fae from the Tog world. Oh my God, look how it's all coming together. The Asteri's propaganda is that they were liberators and enlighteners. According to them, the Asteri chose Midgard as the place to begin creating a perfect empire, and creatures and races from other worlds soon came to Midgard through the Northern Rift. But what none of these other species knew is that the Asteri put parasites in the water to weaken everyone else's magic. The Asteri created the hierarchies of the Vanir and made up a ritual called the Drop to harvest the power of the magical creatures of Midgard. These Vanir are required to hand over their first light upon reaching immortality. It's essentially a tax on their magic, but more importantly, food for the Asteri. And there you go. I apologize if I forgot something. That was
good
a lot.
to her, please.
There you go. The Daglan reign.
Wow. Honestly, props to SJM for creating this. Like, I know that there's Cauldron Boil Me's, but like that's an achievement. Wow.
I remember reading Crescent City 3, specifically the Celine download. And no, you know what? Even Crescent City 2, when Bryce went into the Dusk Room, and it was just like, oh, there were so many things that were just unfolding, and it was so exciting to be connecting all of these dots. And it is just so cool with how we're able to bring it all together. And I can't tell you all how difficult it is to separate this ACOTAR only part from the rest of everything else, because we know so much more.
Well,
let's get into that. Yes. Okay, so quick behind the scenes, not talking about what we actually know about the harp's flashback and the people trying to get through was one of the hardest things that we had to do on an episode. I think that was the first time I've ever pretend theorized, which was basically me just asking a million questions.
I wouldn't even say pretend. You asked all the questions we had until we read Crescent City 3.
Yes.
We know from Celine's download that when she ran back to Prythian, she chose to survive instead of stay on Midgard and fight alongside her sister and her mother. To be fair, also Helena was on her way up into the Prythian portal, and then she chose to stay back and fight with her mother. But anyway, in choosing survival, Celine had to shut the door to Midgard behind her, locking out an untold amount of people and trapping them in Midgard, which question mark, we'll get to that in a second. In Nesta's vision / flashbacks in the prison here, she sees them as their way back is forever sealed. So are they like floating in the in-between, or were they actually still on Midgard and are now super dead thanks to Thea and her daughters?
That was definitely my understanding because of how desperate they were with the enemy coming. And the way that it's described with that opening of the worlds, it feels very much like a door. So that's my understanding. Yes.
That's what I figured. I didn't know if they were like floating around in the black hole, like where the Asteria, like the place in between worlds, if you will. But that makes a lot more sense. Nesta thinks how someone, quote, very wicked used the harp blast. She ain't wrong. And Celine's download obviously has some very interesting choices that Bryce is very vocal about. While I wouldn't call Celine truly evil, though, she made some very complex choices that were inherently very selfish.
It also feels rather full circle that Nesta is present during Celine's download and finds out exactly what happened from her flashback. So during Celine's download, Nesta and Bryce are pretty much on the same team, where it's like, you suck, you bitch.
Yeah.
And Nesta has her own reasons why as well from all of this that happens in Silver Flames.
Well, also, if she's also a descendant from Celine and the Thea line, then her and Bryce have even more in common, considering they're both descendants of that starborn power. But we got to talk about this prison chamber, because we learn in Hofast that the constellations on the floor in the prison chamber are actually the constellations of Midgard. And right after Celine closed the gate, again, on many, many, many people, she sat in this chamber with nothing but the 8-pointed star on it, and she set the harp on top of it right before she started carving the constellations of the world she abandoned. I also wonder if the reason that Nesta alone can step through the wards, other than being made, is if she is a descendant of Celine. We know that Celine keyed her son, the one that glows with starlight, his blood into the prison, making it so that only their bloodline can control the wards of the prison. If Nesta is a descendant, this is her bloodline. So no wonder she alone was able to walk through the wards. Rapid fire, because this Maasverse Madness is probably, I think, the longest we've ever done. I think so.
Honestly, we were even literally talking about it being its own episode.
Yes. At the lake, as Cassian is watching Nesta practice swordplay, he thinks, quote, like that 8-pointed star was stamped on her very heart. This line cannot be an accident, especially because just a few chapters later, it mentions how she was brought to the chamber with an 8-pointed star for a reason. Like, the more and more we deep dive this book, the more and more I'm like, yeah, Nesta's going to resurrect the Dust Court. Absolutely. I will say, however, I was listening to Crescent City 3 on a road trip recently with my husband, and when Bryce resurrects Avalon, she basically uses the magic of Thea to unlock the earth and bring life back into it. So there's a lot of assumption that, oh, well, Nesta's going to do that with the Dust Court. But what does Elaine love to do? Garden. What if she has her gardening love and ability to like bring things to life because she is also a descendant of that same power? So maybe she and the Archeron sisters together are going to be what is able to resurrect the Dust Court. I don't know. I got a little on my little crazy high horse. Another rapid fire.
The 3 pieces of the starlight. I mean, I think that's going to stretch too far, but
hold on. Wait, because you just said, because with Bryce, she had to use the 3 pieces of Thea in order to unlock a... No. The third
She
piece
also
was
needed to
Avalon,
use
never mind.
Gwydion and Truth Teller as well. She used the Star Sword and Truth Teller.
Which are now back
to
on
unlock
Prythian.
it, which are both now on Prythian. Yes. And take this great sword and figure out what to do about that 8-pointed star. Yeah. I think Nesta's going to go back to this exact location here in the prison. And I think that there might be something, like a key.
Like a key unlock. Yes, exactly. Like exactly how it was on Avalon in order to...
Now, what the hell that means for these monsters, I have no idea.
Oh.
But bring the Pegasus back. I'm telling you, Nesta is going to ride off into the sunset on a Pegasus with her beautiful bat boy flying next to her.
Maybe Blue Anus is just going to be buried in the sand, just like the Autumn King was when Avalon. I mean, I know he was dead already, but still. Maybe they'll just be trapped below. It's Anus. I know it is, but no, it's Anus. What is it? Oh my God, I have 2 more. Okay. During the Wild Hunt mention, Lanthus says how they had hounds, and Rhys later says that they don't look like any kind of hounds they're used to today. And Nesta notes how these hounds look a lot like the hounds of the Hewn City. From ACOSF, the descriptions of the beasts of the Hewn City look like, quote, great scaled black beasts were carved into these gates, all coiled together, all in a nest of claws and fangs, sleeping and fighting, some locked in endless cycle of devouring each other. Now, some people wonder if this is a version of word hounds, although I wonder because the description matches more that of the Ilkin, just without the wings, much like Rhys's form. No matter what, I'm 100% positive that this is a crossover mix hint, but I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison. Kind of like how the Volg and the Asteri we think are like evolved versions of each other. In the bonus chapter with Nesta, Azriel, and Bryce, where the latter plays the music on her phone and Nesta loves it, Azriel loves it, it's great, and Nesta is baffled when she learns all of the different kinds of music and how many songs such a small device can hold. I just love that small tidbit of information and how much each of the SJM women has a passion for the arts. It's just so great. And last but not least, we can't not mention the 4th object in Lanthus's vision, made out of ancient bone. Of course, it is Luna's horn that is now tattooed on Bryce's back.
And it seems like it's veiled in shadow, I believe, because it's worlds away that they're not able to truly see it. Yes, exactly.
All right, friends, that is it for today's episode. Oh boy, that was
that's it. That's all. We started off like bawling our eyes out and then ended up with the craziest Maasverse Madness.
We said this was a roller coaster today.
We certainly did. Next episode, get ready for a holiday special. It is going to be covering chapters 56 through 59 of Silver Flames. Can't wait to go dancing.
Thank you, as always, to our content researcher, Brooke. Boy, oh boy, did you earn your title this week. And of course, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We love you both. And of course, share this episode with your fellow Silver Flames friends. Honestly, just share this episode with your fellow CC3 friends at this point. It was basically CC3 for the last hour. We love you guys so much.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye. Her and Cassian DTR, maybe not with the word mates, but DTR as much as possible.
What does DTR mean?
Define the relationship.
Oh, excuse me.
She and her
like
friends
down to
rabble.